Mr. Nixon, can you see if WinCam has us? I don't see them here. So we'll be going live in just a moment, everyone. We're just waiting to make sure we can get.
Brian Suzette's on the list.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Okay, let me I will make her a panelist so that she can have access to anything she needs to while she's doing that. So WinCam, if you could just let us know when you are ready to go. Okay, well, thank you so much. We are ready to call to order. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to the February 23rd, 2021 regular school committee meeting. We have a lengthy agenda tonight. We have student representatives coming, and I see we have Caroline here. Thank you for coming. We have public comments. We have report and discussion items. We have a mascot update. We have COVID-19 district update. We have interim superintendent update. We have fiscal year 22 budget update. We have superintendent evaluation process update. We have a policy subcommittee update. And then we have action items. We have some WIFI grants to approve. We have a job description to approve. We have program studies for McCall and Winchester High School, which we reviewed before vacation to approve. We have vote to approve the superintendent evaluation focus areas. We do not, I believe, have any minutes to approve tonight. I believe they've been pushed off to next week. And we have vote to eliminate a redundant policy. Chair report, superintendent report, future agenda items, and future meetings. And with that, I would love to welcome Caroline to give us a student report. We are so happy you could come, and my apologies, I usually send a reminder, but somehow you of course made it even without my reminder, so thank you so much.
Hi, no, that's really fine. Evan couldn't make it tonight, but I'm just going to give a quick update. Not too much going on. Today was the start of the new sports season this year called Fall 2, which is kind of squeezed in between the winter season that just ended, and it's going to be before the spring sports season this year. That just started. That's like girls volleyball, swimming, and like indoor track and stuff like that. The boys basketball team, their season just finished. It was during the winter season, but they won the league for the first time since 1947. So that was really exciting for them, even though only live streaming could watch. Today, the high school students got the email for the WHS COVID pool testing, which is like a volunteer testing thing. I don't know too much about that. I haven't taken a good look at the email yet, but that's very exciting. I know a lot of my friends were talking about that already, said it was really cool that they're starting to do that. And then student council is just in the early stages of planning a virtual night of the arts like we do every year, which we usually do on a half day in March, I believe. But this year it's just going to kind of be like an online virtual event where we're going to have like art on display and like videos of live performances and stuff. So we're working on planning that. And that's it, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much. Are you finding that settling in well after the vacation? I hope it was restful, or I hope it felt like a vacation despite COVID. Things settling quickly back into school?
Yeah, things are good. Kind of a nice break, even though it didn't go anywhere. Stuck around.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for coming. As always, please feel free to stick around. We have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, as I mentioned, and we always like your input and your participation. So feel free to stay as long as you can, but I also know, as always, it's a school night. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move into public comment. And before we start public comment, I'd like to remind everyone that public comment is an opportunity for you to come and speak on matters under the purview of the school committee. It is not a dialogue. It is not a question and answer session. We welcome you to speak, and what we will be doing in a moment is we'll be lowering all hands and then allowing you to raise your hands. your digital hands. That is, you should see it on the bottom of the right panel, I believe, or in the bottom in the middle of the screen. It's always a little bit different. And we will endeavor to stick to our policy guideline of 20 minutes and 3 minutes per participant. So if you raise your hand, we will elevate you and welcome you to speak. So please feel free and go ahead and raise your hands. And I'm going to get over here and I will elevate Erica Hoffman. Ms. Hoffman, if you could state your name and address for the committee.
Can you hear me? Okay.
A little louder.
Sorry. Okay. So my name is Erica Hoffman. It's 7 Fairlane Terrace in Winchester. I'd like to address the school committee and Dr. Evans to please address the dyslexia letter that was sent on February 12th, where they stand and what they're doing in regard to the items and the action points that they mentioned in the dyslexia letter. Because I believe there hasn't been a response from the school committee or Dr. Evans. Also, I wanted to say that today I watched the Governor Baker's press conference with Commissioner Riley, and I applaud them for finally announcing the importance of in-person learning, particularly for the elementary age children. It has given me a little hope that we will see 5 days in-person learning this year and in the fall. Subsequently, I would like to bring to the attention to those listening in the community and to remind Dr. Evans and the school committee of the following correspondence. On November 19th, the superintendent update email contained the following paragraph. The district COVID-19 planning and implementation team is working on several options for the second semester that we hope will include more in-person learning time. Grade 6 to 12 schedules are likely to change significantly at that time. For this reason, we would ask that families reconsider or considering a change for hybrid to full remote, wait until the second semester if possible. An email from Dr. Evans on January 4th states the following. District personnel have been reviewing options for increasing in-person learning opportunities in the district. Many of the issues like staffing, space, and cohorting that required the district to implement the hybrid or full remote options remain in place and limit flexibility, especially for students in grades 6 to 12. At this time, it's unlikely we will see a significant change in the middle high school hybrid models. We remain committed to finding ways to increase the number of in-person days and increasing literacy support for our younger learners in grades kindergarten and first. And we hope that to make similar changes to students in grades 2 to 5, and additional federal funding becomes available. My superintendent's update email from today, February 23rd, states, return to school options for K to 5 students. As you know, principals and district administrators have been working to review several options for a transition to increased in-person learning for many months, especially in the K to 5 level. While each return option has many associated complex challenges and hard choices, it is time to narrow those choices and bring them forward to the school committee for review and vote. As we worked on return plans, we anticipated eagerly awaited further information from the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, State Public Health, and the Governor's Office that would guide us with this process. But it appears that our long-hoped for vaccination for staff members are months away from completion, and recent CDC return to school guidelines direct conflict with many recommendations supported by DC. You are likely to hear that DC Commissioner announced today that he expects all schools to return to 5-day in-person learning in April. Districts were given no choice of this mandate and little guidance or support to make this happen safely. This conflicting and incomplete guidance from the DC is very frustrating for us all. We are left to make the best decisions possible for our Winchester students and are committed to doing so. We want nothing more than to have all students back safely in school. I plan to convene this week with a Winchester Public School K to 5 working group drawn from members of the district COVID-19 planning and implementation team. This working group will include principals, teachers, and parents, and will narrow options and present them to the school committee for feedback at the March 16th meeting. The decision process will include family, staff surveys, and available options, and we look forward to your feedback. DC asked for our 3 plans back in the summer for full remote, hybrid, and full in-person. This is not new. We have always needed a full in-person plan. The emails from Dr. Evans in November and January were only provided to give us a false sense to the school community that herself and the team have been working on a more in-person plan. It is obvious from today's email that the school committee and administration have not been working with the district COVID-19 planning and implementation team on more in-person learning plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no additional public comment, I will close public comment. Wait, I see one more. I'll keep a public comment. Now I see two. Okay, I just needed to give a moment. So I will elevate Michelle McCarthy. Ms. McCarthy, state your name and address for the committee.
Hi, my name is Michelle McCarthy. I live at 29 Oxford Street in Winchester. Thank you everyone for all of your hard work. I applaud you all. I know how much you're working and on all the volunteer hours. It's unbelievable during this time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I guess I'm just looking for some exciting news. I was excited to hear the governor today, and then we got Judy Evans' email. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about maybe expectations. I think you all know I've been pushing a lot for possibly Wednesdays to be more in person. I know there's so many moving parts. I have children at the Ambrose Elementary School and children at the middle school. So I understand how difficult scheduling is with so many children in place, but would just love to hear if you have had any time to absorb the governor's press conference today, if Winchester will consider the 3 feet that he said, and also what does that mean for Winchester, for the elementary and for the middle school? I'm not trying to leave the high school students out. I don't have any children there, but I would love to hear your thoughts about the 3 feet and Wednesdays or anything you're thinking about for April. Would just love to hear more about that. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for the kind words. I will return you to attendee, and I will elevate Ms. Brady. Ms. Brady, if you would state your name and address for the committee.
Hi, I'm sorry, this is actually Seamus. Sorry about that.
That's okay, Mr. Brady, if you'd state your name and address for the committee.
Hi, this is Seamus Brady, 15 Clematis Street, and I'm speaking not in my capacity as a finance committee member, but rather in my capacity as a citizen of Winchester. I just wanted to commend and thank the school committee on their great interim superintendent search. I think you all did a great job as someone who's worked with 4 superintendents. I was very impressed with both candidates, and I think you did an excellent job in selecting a candidate who will really be an excellent leader for our district. I know the candidate and have known of him for quite some time. So again, I just want to compliment everyone who ran the search committee and then you all as a school committee for allowing us to get such a great candidate for an interim position. It's one of the more impressive interim candidates I've seen hired in my career. So I just wanted to congratulate you all and thank you all for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brady, and we're thrilled too. I will, seeing any additional public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and thank everyone who came tonight to speak. I reserve for my chair report making comments, but since I want to make sure that everyone here gets a chance to hear it, I want to give a plug to the, I just need to find the exact information. There will be a Morocco Culvert Flood Mitigation Project and Morocco School Immediate Repair public information session on Thursday, February 25th at 6 p.m. You should be able to get the Zoom information by going to the town-wide calendar, but we will also, I will try to make available at some point so that we can get that to everyone. But I just want to make sure everybody who wants to be able to come to that will have an opportunity. So again, that's Thursday night on February 25th at 6 p.m. And I'll repeat this during chair report, but I suspect we won't have 64 attendees by the time we make it to my chair report tonight. So I just wanted to give a plug for that. And with that, I would like to move on to the first report and discussion item, which is the mascot update. And we have a number of guests who need to be elevated. So if you'll give us a moment, we will work through that, and then we will proceed. Ms. Bolognese, that everyone, are we missing somebody? One, okay.
I am still looking for Mr. Mahoney, but maybe you are.
Mr. Mahoney has already been elevated. He's right there, waving.
Okay, I was busy looking for students.
Thank you so much. Ms. Bolognese is much more facile at that than I am, so I need her assistance. Mr. Mahoney, welcome. I assume that you are going to kick this off, and I will give you also sharing privileges in case you want to share something.
We do. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having us. We are very excited. This is a watershed moment in the history of Winchester High School, as well as the entire community. Our process tonight, I will be reading a lengthy, detailed report of the dates and times and what we did, how we did it. And then the students will be presenting a short slideshow of part of our thought process, and then presenting a sort of a grand finale of our recommendation to the school committee. I want to reiterate that we're making a recommendation to the school committee. Nothing has been accepted or voted upon, and this has actually been a pretty well-kept secret in the community. So we're pretty proud of that. But most importantly, I'm going to read some names tonight, and they're representing 19 people that made up this working group, the rebranding committee, and I could not be more proud of them. They're a hand-selected group of people on both sides of the argument, some points extreme sides of the argument, as well as people that were in the middle, and everybody came together, compromised, worked together to bring the community forward and to transition Winchester High School and the community into something new going forward that a lot of people can get behind. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I do want to just share the beginning of the presentation in a second.
Mr. Chairman, just point of information, can we pause? I don't know if WinCam is aware. It looks like they have a Windows update announcement on their screen, and that's blocking those at home watching on WinCam to see what Mr. Mahoney is about to share. Those of us on Zoom are not seeing that. That is on WinCam feed if they're able to do something about it.
So thank you. I would reiterate what Mr. Nixon just said to WinCam. I'm not able to see what's blocking it. How much of the space is being blocked on WinCam? Can you?
Well, there's a big blue box right in the middle of the presentation. We just may have to go here without it, and perhaps WinCam will record, and they can always rebroadcast without this box, I hope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nixon. So anybody on Zoom should be able to have the unblocked presentation.
We can always share it's only 8 slides, and we can share that out with the community following the presentation as well.
Thank you very much.
So on July 28th, the Winchester Public Schools School Committee voted unanimously on the following 2 items. Motion 1, the Winchester Public Schools shall no longer appropriate names, images, or practices from Native American, Alaska Native cultures, or specific American Indian, Alaska Native tribes, including for any team, name, logo, or mascot. Motion 2, the superintendent of the schools shall develop for school committee review a transitional plan for the new Winchester High School logo and or mascot, including scope, cost, and timeline. The plan shall be inclusive of the school and parent community and honor the achievements of our students, both past and present. So that was the charge that this group was given. And I want to go over the steps by steps, but throughout the entire process, we took every step we could possibly take to make this as a transparent process as possible. And we could not be more proud about that because every bit of data and information was shared with the community as we went along, and everybody in the entire community, not just the schools, was given an opportunity to weigh in. So in early August, the Winchester Public Schools School Committee adopted a transition plan put forth by Dr. Judith Evans and the Winchester High School administration to begin the process of selecting a new Winchester High School mascot and name. In mid-August, Winchester High School administration reached out to the Winchester High School students and the greater community to create a coalition of students, faculty, coaches, parents, and community members whose purpose was to develop the process and timeline to transition Winchester High School to a new school identity. Potential volunteers were asked to submit their names via an online form and state why they were interested in being a member of the coalition. We had over 75 people volunteer to be part of this process. The names were chosen because we wanted to represent all sides of the argument. Again, extreme sides of the argument as well as the middle. The WHS administration then chose these candidates, and the names are, grade 12, Lulu Girardi, Brendan Gill, Luca Tedesco, and Thalia Sakharafos. Grade 11, Varun Swaminathan, Roxy Arnett, and Stephen Birchfield. Grade 10, Ada Norton and Thomas Morier. And grade 9, Ella Mathis. We also had PFA co-president Maya Harrison. Maya is a parent of an 8th, 10th, and 11th grader. We have the Winchester Sports Foundation member Paul Manganaro, who's also a parent of a 12th grader. Creative advisor Sean McDowell, who's also a parent of a 9th and 11th grader. Our faculty representatives were John Fleming, who also coaches 3 sports and is the alumni board president. Faculty Joel Buford, who is our chorus and performing arts teacher. Suzanne Onso, who is our guidance counselor and coach. A parent coach representative was Phil Royland, who's also featured here tonight. He's a lacrosse coach, alumni, parent, and a parent of a 9th grader, and coach and alumni member Diana Matthews. We also had administration, Mr. John Dupuy, myself, and athletic director, Mr. Aria. So hopefully everybody hears those names and understands the true cross-section of our community that's represented there. And again, these people, I want to applaud them. I want to laud them for coming together and working together to be part of the solution. And I could not be prouder of any member of this community that we worked with. It was really something that hopefully the whole community sees, that here's a group of people that were on opposite sides of an argument, and they came together for the greater good, found a solution, they were part of the solution, and they're able to move their school and community forward. So I want to publicly thank them and commend them, and hopefully if people see them, they know what they've done for their community. The WHS Mascot Logo Committee was formed in late September and began meeting to develop a timeline and process for a smooth transition. A shared email account was created to answer any community questions that may occur, and multiple people on the committee had access to the email account. The following timeline does not cover the many virtual meetings and email discussions that went into this effort. In mid-October, the timeline and process was shared out to all Winchester High School, the greater community, and the Alumni Association. In late October, the WHS rebranding team sent out a request to all Winchester High School and the greater community and the Alumni Association, asking for feedback on what makes Winchester High School special. This was known as the Pillars. In early November, a reminder for the form would close was sent out. In early January, the results of the Pillar survey were shared out publicly to all Winchester High School, greater community, as well as the Alumni Association. Again in early January, the request for the new WHS mascot and name submissions based on the community-wide Pillar feedback was sent out to all Winchester High School, the greater community, and the Alumni Association. On February 9th, the WHS rebranding committee met to discuss the process and next steps. It was decided at that meeting that the committee had enough information from the community and community response that we can now make a final recommendation to the school committee. In tonight's meeting, we're going to present to you a little bit more of our process. And our first speaker will be Ada Norton.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Ada, and I'm super excited to help with the WHS rebranding team's mascot recommendation. So throughout the process, we started out by making a mission statement, and so here's just a little reflection from that. So throughout these few months, we've basically stuck to our mission statement of trying to be a voice for all. We've made progress, and we collected data that came straight from the entire Winchester community. We engaged the community to provide mascot submissions that focused around the 4 pillars that made Winchester High School what it is today: academic excellence, community, inclusivity, pride, and unity. That's actually 5, sorry. We maintained full transparency and open communication throughout the entire process and stuck to our mission statement.
Our next presenter is Stephen Birchfield.
I believe, Stephen, you may be muted. Stephen, if you can hear us.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. You're muted. That's okay.
Yeah. My internet.
Totally understand.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you well. Sometimes if you turn off your image, it actually reduces the internet, and then you can actually get a better job. We found that.
Our submission collection. I'm sorry. So our submission collection process was a multifaceted approach. We made sure that, I'm sorry. Sorry, here, I think my internet came back.
No, we can hear you well. Yes, we can hear you well. Don't worry, we're good.
Okay. So our submission collection process was a multifaceted approach. We made sure to include the diversity of the diversity of the opinions in the committee, school, and Winchester. As Mr. Mahoney mentioned, we were transparent in our feedback opportunities that we provided throughout our process. And in December 2020, we sent out a form asking the community what our mascot should be. And we received over 400 responses to this online form, and there was one response that received 76 votes, the most out of any.
Thank you, Stephen. We're going to have Roxy Arnett now present.
So we believe that our recommendation honors the history of our town in a more inclusive and less controversial way, in a manner that spotlights and recognizes our students more so than a particular figure. The recommendation was clearly the most popular submission with the greatest share of votes, and its tradition in our town goes as far back as 1905.
Our next presenter will be Brendan Gill.
How's it going? So, as the sachem will be missed for many, we tried to think of many ways for us to continue having the history behind Winchester and honoring our past. So we decided to come up with the red and black.
And our final presenter will be Lulu Girardi. So before we get to Lulu, officially, our recommendation will be going, what is past is now present or future. We'd like to be known as the red and black.
Hi, everyone. So if this mascot is accepted by the Winchester School Committee, we have a couple steps moving forward. First, we will announce the decision to the entire community, which I'm sure some of them already caught on. And then we will begin to design a mascot, like a physical mascot for the red and black, which will be very much led by the students at Winchester High School, where they will be able to submit their art so that we can pick one that comes from a Winchester student. Along with creating a new physical mascot, we will be dedicating the wing by the school gym at WHS to a historical memorabilia of the Sachems history to honor our past.
Thank you, Lulu. A few points of clarity. We're not looking for an actual mascot like a cartoon character. We're talking about a font style and artistic design of the red and black. And that'll be going out for students, a student art submission, student art contest. And we won't be dedicating the entire wing over by PE. We'll be doing a cabinet area where the trophies are currently as a museum piece. A few points just to follow up. The kids, again, I could not be prouder of these kids as well as the adults on the committee. We love the idea of honoring the past, honoring the history, because it respects a lot of people and what they did before us. It also makes us very unique. We could not find another high school in the country that would be called the same thing as the red and black. And it puts the spotlight on our students, our student athletes, our student performers, rather than a mascot or cartoon character of any kind. So it really, our focus will be the school and the students and nothing else. And we're proud of that. It also, again, standing out is something that Winchester High School likes to do. So being known as the red and black is something to be proud of. And we'll take any questions that the school committee may have. And Mr. Royland's here as the parent representative, coach, and alumni as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahoney, and a huge thank you to all of the student representatives. This is obviously, it's always hard to put yourself out in front of the public, not just talking about coming to the meeting tonight, but putting yourself out in front of your peers, in front of the adults in the community, in front of the alumni in the community. And you guys, I know you worked hard. I've been following along with what's been taking place. And I really appreciate, I speak for the whole committee, I'm sure, when I say we really appreciate everything you've put into to making this recommendation a reality. And so thank you. And with that, I would like to open it up to questions or comments from the committee. And I see that Ms. Marchant has her hand raised. Ms. Marchant.
Winchester is exceptional for many reasons, but I think this process has put us way over the top. I really want to thank everyone, especially the students and the parents who really struggled with this decision and for whom the previous mascot meant a lot and symbolized a lot. But you came together in a very controversial topic, and you were able to come to a very beautiful moment in presenting it to us today. And I couldn't ask for more in a public education system than a system that is able to bring together students with varied opinions, varied backgrounds, and come to a consensus on something. And so I'm overjoyed. I'm incredibly proud of us, and especially the students and the leadership of Mr. Mahoney and Dr. Evans in this process. I'm humbled, and you guys have truly given me hope for the future, that no matter what, there are people out there who are willing to come to the table and have a civil deliberation on an issue and then coming to a really beautiful consensus that also honors the past that so many have valued, especially the athlete we lost, Mr. Gill. I honor that, and I hope you feel our love and appreciation that you were able to come to the table and do this. It means the world to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marchant. Ms. Bergstrom, I see you have your hand raised. But you're also still muted too.
Too many clicks. I also wanted to just take a moment to thank the students and parents, and something that Mr. Mahoney said at the beginning stuck with me, which was that it was a wide range of the community and it was a spectrum of ideas. And I think that this really illustrates how some of the best decisions we can come to are when we hear from people with a wide spectrum of ideas, and when they can all come to the table and collaborate. I sort of envy the people in the room. I would have liked to have been a little spider on the wall to be able to listen to some of those conversations, because I'm sure you had a lot of rich discussions and learned a lot about each other in the process as well. And I really applaud you for being able to bring something to us that you are happy and satisfied and proud of. And I think that you should be proud of yourselves for the work that you've done as part of this. I was wondering, I just had one quick question. I myself have heard some stories historically. I followed the work that you did and saw some of the history behind the red and black, but I was wondering if any of the students would like to share with us. You alluded to that history. If you'd like to share with us what that history is that you're honoring by that, because not everybody with us tonight may have taken part in the process or understand the historical perspective behind red and black.
Thank you, Ms. Bergholm. If anybody who came to present tonight wants to speak, please consider that question to you.
So what I think of when I hear of the red and black as our mascot is that it was the mascot for many, many years, as you guys probably know, before the Sachem was adopted as the WHS mascot. So when we were looking through all the submissions, not only was this the one with like the highest number of votes, but it's also the one that we thought would bring the community together the most, since it was like going back to our history, like a lot of people thought that the Sachem did, and we thought that we were sort of going back in a more non-controversial way. And we think that it'll help unify us because we can like reflect on the accomplishments that were made like before we were here. And we can also be really excited to move forward. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If anybody else who spoke came tonight wanted to speak on that, I would welcome anyone else too. I don't want anybody to feel like they don't have an opportunity. Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, additionally, you know that the Red and Black is the name of our school newspaper, and for a lot of places, the school newspaper and the mascot reflect each other. So that's why I feel like the Red and Black is important not only as it's important to their history, but important in our continuing with keeping everything in the same realm. That makes sense. It will keep our colors. It will make our we can keep the W on many of our Winchester uniforms and Winchester around the school. And I think it's a good way that we balanced everything out.
Thank you very much. Certainly anyone else who has anything they want to add, and also committee members, if they have any additional questions, I would or comments, I would welcome anyone else. Ms. Bolognese.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the contribution of all of you and all your time and your effort to really come together and work through this whole process together. I thought that the process overall and the communication this entire time period since last August, since the beginning of last August, what you as students and community have done was just excellent. I really appreciated all of your communication. And I love the uniqueness and the spotlight on the red and the black from Winchester High School. And I also really appreciate that you've gone back in our history to these earlier time periods when the red and black was part of us originally. And I love that sense of continuity and how you have used this to unify the community. So my hat's off to all of you. I really appreciate everything that you've done and how you've brought together different parts of the community and worked together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolognese. Any additional questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, I will again, thank you for a tremendous amount of work and thought and care that went into this. I am an alumnus of Winchester High School, and the red and the black means a lot to me. I was on the newspaper, so I tie back when you mentioned the newspaper, that comes right to mind. And I think it will be helpful for alumni to feel a tie back to the school, and it will help as we move forward for the next generation, both tie back and look forward. So I'm really pleased with this recommendation. I would suggest that this is something that we have as an agenda item, as an action item to consider and vote on this at either our next meeting or the following meeting, just depends on the agendas that we have. And I would certainly welcome you all to be in attendance at that meeting when we do that. And Mr. Mahoney, I don't know if you have any final thoughts, or Dr. Evans, before we move on.
I'll welcome Mr. Mahoney to see us out on this agenda item. I just want to thank everybody for your hard work, your sensitivity, and your inclusivity with which you approach this task. I couldn't be proud of our students every day. And as Mr. Mahoney gave me updates on the group's progress, I knew how thoughtful everyone was being and how open-minded. And so thank you again. We're really proud of all of you. Mr. Mahoney, any last thoughts before we close out this?
I've said it all, and everyone else has said it. I'm proud of our transparency. I'm proud of our kids. I'm proud of the adults on the committee as well. And it's just whether you wanted this HM or you didn't want this HM, whether you like our suggestion, whether you don't like it, I hope we can all recognize how a group of people on opposite sides of an argument came together to be part of the solution, worked together, and moved the boulder forward. And I'm just so proud of that. And it's the kids, it's the adults, it's the community that was able to allow us to do this.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so I would welcome, I think if any of you want to stay on in the meeting, I think we actually have to send you back to attendees. If you're logging out, you can just log out and we'll see you later. But what we will do is we'll send you back to being attendees and we'll continue on with the rest of our meeting. So give us a moment, and thank you all for coming tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Go red and black.
Thank you. Mr. Verdalio, you're much faster at that than I am.
I was thinking you were faster than I was because we still have Roxy. Let me get, okay, there you go. Central. Now, did we accidentally send someone to an attendee who should be here? Is anybody missing? Because I occasionally have done that. I've sent someone there accidentally. I don't think so. Okay. Well, that was great. And as I said, that should be an action item to consider at a future meeting. And with that, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, which is the COVID-19 district update. And for this, we would like to elevate Ms. Murphy, who I hope is still here because I may have mistakenly told her it was going to be first on the agenda item. I've got her. But I will we'll elevate her first, and then I will. There you are. Thank you, Ms. Murphy, for coming, and I will turn it over to Dr. Evans to kick us off, and then we'll quickly include you in the conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Evans.
Sure, happy to see Ms. Murphy. We're frequent contactors of each other to talk about COVID matters, and so her help has been invaluable. Most recently, I want to thank her for giving the school department the benefit of Jess Heffernan, who is helping us with our pooled testing pilot. Without the help of the public health department, we wouldn't be able to have moved forward, and we're excited to talk more about that tonight. So it probably would be most helpful for Ms. Murphy to address a couple of things tonight. One is, what is the status in the community of positive cases and in the schools, and any trends or concerns that she's seeing. And then also, we're going to talk tonight about the surprising and a kind of unexpected turn of events where the Commissioner of Education has mandated or will recommend to the Board of Education that all students return in full in just a few weeks. There are implications for contact tracing and based on the number of students present in a classroom. And so Ms. Murphy and I have discussed this at length all the way through, but if she has any thoughts on that, I'd be happy to hear them. So I'll turn it over to her and she can give you any updates that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Urban. Ms. Murphy, I would just tag on there any information that's come from the CDC recommendations that have been or have not yet been adopted by the Mass Department of Public Health, because I know that you had mentioned that not everything had been adopted yet. So thank you again for coming tonight, and I apologize. I think I got the order of things wrong when I told you when you're coming, so thank you so much.
No worries. If you don't mind, I do have a PowerPoint that I can share so we can go over some of the data.
Yes, please. And you should have access to share.
Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great.
Very well.
Okay. So right now, as everyone knows, we're seeing, and basically we're seeing this throughout the state, as a trend of significant and marked decline of cases. And we are thankfully experiencing that in Winchester. It's a period of calm, although when I say that, I have to knock on wood. Okay. And so this data is going to, actually first, why don't I go over the data from the dashboard that I have captured in some slides here. And so we update this weekly now. And so this past Monday, last night, it was updated. So we now have over 1,000 cases confirmed in Winchester. And we know that number is probably bigger. In other words, some people have been ill without being confirmed by PCR analysis. But as of right now, we have 26 active cases, which is very low. I think our contact tracers are happy to have a little breather at this moment. So, we have 1,036 cases were recovered and 15 total deaths of those cases. And I just want to emphasize that the deaths that have occurred, unfortunately, among our residents have been folks that are older in our community, mostly over the age of 80. And that's unfortunate. And getting into the school data, right now we have 6 active confirmed cases, which is also good to see. That number is fairly low. It's always been low, and I think that we've always talked about how successful overall that we have been in keeping the schools open in a hybrid model, and that it's been more successful certainly than the community has at limiting transmission. And so we have been open a lot longer than I ever would have predicted, honestly, at the outset of the school year, because no one knew, frankly, how this was going to go. But I am so thankful that the caseload has remained low. Overall, 228 cases amongst in-person staff and students within our school buildings. The positivity trend line or the positivity rates have declined dramatically, even in the surrounding communities. We are now down to 1.6% positivity rate, which is quite low. And I'm happy to say that we're surrounded by towns that are now less than 5%. Woburn and Burlington, especially, you'll see they enjoy a little over 2 point, well, just under 3% positivity rate. So this is all very good news. We're trending in the right direction. People often now ask me if I attribute this directly to the vaccination that's happening. And it's a little too early for me to feel confident in saying absolutely yes. I don't think anyone would say that. I think it is a factor, certainly. It's a contributing factor, but I think we need to wait and see a little longer how this plays out. We've got to keep the vaccination efforts strong. throughout the state. This is just the trend line of the positivity rate. You'll see an incredible decline there since January, really. Once we got past that winter break surge, we had a big surge after Thanksgiving. We had a surge after the holiday break and the Christmas holiday period. And so now you'll see that that has dropped dramatically. This is just snapshot tables of our cases over time, these trend lines. You can see again, for our community cases, the table on the left, you'll see the line starting to trend slightly downward. So for January, we had 313 total cases. Again, not where we've been previous to December, however, going in the right direction. And the table on the right is the school community cases. For January, we had 87 total cases, which was certainly a number that we can certainly do better. And I believe we are going to bear out better once we see our February data. Again, that was attributed to, I believe, the post-holiday, the post-winter break surge, as well as some other events that were attributed to social gatherings in January. This is to break out the data even further. These are cases that are age 5 to 18. And while they're school-aged cases, it would take a little bit more effort for us to drill down into and to separate out those that are in this group that are private schooled and as well as remote only. But I think though that percentage of students isn't as great as those taking place in our in-person learning. So the N here is 224 cases and total for this age group. And I just want to show and highlight that, success is in recovery, right? No one has passed away amongst this age group in town. So that's obviously very good news. And neither have there been any hospital admissions. And that is to say no one has been admitted. However, people may have gone to the ER but been sent home. People may have been treated at their doctor's office. This isn't to say they didn't seek out medical help. It's just to say there have been no one was admitted in this age group from town. Oops, sorry. This is a chart of the age distribution, and this has fluctuated over time. Perhaps the last time we spoke, I was talking about, the 40 to 49 age group, how they were sort of leading the number of cases. Now this, you'll see, has changed. The age group 10 to 19 went up a little bit more. And it really seems to even out over a couple of age ranges here. But you'll see for yourself the breakdown here. And this will all be posted on our website as well. So afterwards, folks can go and look at this in more detail. This is an interesting trend line, though, for the age group. I wanted to show because it actually shows you what happened from December to January amongst the 17 to 18-year-olds, and it really stands out. But you can see over time that trend line did increase. And we broke this out for ages 5 to 18 by groupings of 2 years. I think you'll see these trend lines start to go, downward for the month of February, but you'll see that it did ramp upward from December on. So this is a question that we have been asking for a little while. In terms of symptoms, who's presenting with symptoms amongst our cases? So in this age group, we see that 62% of our confirmed cases did present with symptoms or did report to us that they did experience symptoms. And we listed out exactly what those symptoms were. And these can be more than one were reported for one case, but this is just to show you the types of symptoms of the data that we collected. And these are based on what the state has asked us to ask of our confirmed cases. And to break it out even further, and it seems a little busy, but what I really want to highlight here is that the difference in age groups. I think people ask often, well, what's the experience amongst elementary kids versus older kids? And so this is to help better clarify that. So the 0 to 4 age range is more to capture the preschool age, and you'll see that 50% of those confirmed cases presented with symptoms or reported symptoms. Fever seemed to be the greatest symptom reported there. And then in our elementary school age kids, age 5 to 10, you'll see that 55% reported to us that they experienced one or more symptoms. Again, fever seemed to be the greatest symptom reported. And then as we look at the older students, middle school and high school, age 11 to 18, we had 66% report symptoms. So again, it was for the elementary range, 55% reported symptoms. And for the middle school and high school cases, 66% reported symptoms. But I think what's an important distinction, not only are the older children reporting illness, 11% more reported illness. But I think it's important to note that the duration of illness was less and the severity of illness was less amongst our elementary school kids. That's an important distinction. And then 58% of 19 and older cases reported symptoms. And you'll see that in the middle school and high school symptoms, headache was a very common symptom. And yeah, so anyway, so I thought this was very interesting to break out, and we can try to do a little more analysis of this. It just requires a bit of time and digging through the data. But happy to, if people have any queries that they would like us to do, we can certainly work on that. And this is simply to answer the question about confirmed cases broken down by race. 92% of our cases reported as white, and 7% Asian, and 1% African American. And I can break this out even further. However, these are what were reported to us upon our contact with the cases. And just to give you some raw numbers around that, it was 182 reported being white, 13 Asian, and 2 African American. So that's the raw data around those percentages there. Does anybody have any questions on the data, just before I touch on the other topics that were mentioned?
Any questions? Thank you. Any questions? Anyone? So I have a question. If you go back to toward the top where you have, I mean, it's pretty much the one of the first couple of slides where you have the case of that one right there, where we see the confirmed Winchester resident and in-person confirmed cases. The blue lines don't obviously track with each other. One blue line, the Winchester residents, we see the downturn, and the Winchester district in-person students and staff continues to rise. I know you haven't, so my two questions would be sort of one, I know you haven't analyzed February, and February has 3 or 4 fewer days, 3 fewer days than January. But are we going to start seeing that downturn in February for our students? And then I guess my follow-up question would be, it's just in a thought, it's lovely to see it go from 338 to 313 in Winchester residents, but we have to look and see that is still, when we had 132 cases in November, that's almost 2.5 times that. And we were shocked by that. So I just want to make sure that I'm curious about your opinions about the magnitude. There's the direction and a magnitude. The magnitude seems still pretty high, but the direction is in the right direction. So I'm curious about those two questions, if you have any thoughts.
So the first question, your first question regarding February data, I do anticipate, based on what the numbers we've seen so far, that you'll see the same downward trend.
Okay.
Yes. And sorry, the second part of your question?
I really, it's sort of, I don't know, just a thought is that, the going downward from 338 to 313 is really nice to see. But I remember back in November when it was 132 and we were aghast that it was twice as much as October. We're now 2.5 times that. I'm just curious about your impressions. Is 313 a good number? Is sort of your thoughts on it? I mean, because you're watching this, I still see that as a very high number, but going in the right direction. Is that really just the only way to characterize it? I mean, high but going in the right direction.
Right, right. I think most communities experience the same post-holiday surges that we saw, and that was a very uncomfortable place to be. I'm hoping that that trend line continues downward, because again, I agree with you that 313 is not where we want to be in 1 month's time, because I know we can do better. And I think there are several factors that will help us out, vaccination being one of them, although I don't know how important, I mean, not important, but I don't know, it's going to take time, in other words, for that to continue in that trend. So do we want to be here? No. I mean, you're correct. We can do much better than that. And I think we will be. Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's about all I can say for that.
It was an open-ended question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Ms. Bergstrom, you had your hand raised, and then Ms. Marchant, you raised second. But you're muted.
I have a follow-up on Mr. Vernalia's question on this. It was somewhat related. We saw an enormous rise after the Thanksgiving holidays. It was only a couple days off school. We also had a lot of testing around Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm wondering if you're still seeing the same testing levels come in for Winchester that we saw around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and if you expect to see a rise in cases. Generally it's, up to a week after the holiday that we start to see it, I believe. So I'm thinking of February break that we just came back from, and wondering if you're anticipating a rise in that also, or if you think we're really in a better place. And then I'll just add my second question, because it's a couple slides above that, so you can do both of them at once. And you had talked about 100% of students in the schools had recovered. Does that include students who are suffering post-COVID symptoms? Are they still counted as recovered? Does public health track that? And do we consider those students recovered?
Right. So to answer the second part of your question first is no, we don't track at the local level anyway, that data regarding post-infectious illness or lingering effects post the infectious period. So in other words, a recovered case is as soon as their infectious period is over and people can resume their normal daily activities and re-enter society, so to speak. So we don't know, or in other words, I don't have that data. I don't have access to that data about beyond that time period. So recovered simply means they have stopped being infectious and cannot pose a risk to anyone else. And the first part of your question was in terms of testing. So the testing numbers you'll see here. So for Winchester, the over 5,000 tests that was conducted, we're still at a very good rate of testing. And hopefully we can maintain that, and we should, as we're adding, at least in the community, we're adding some testing that I can tell you a little bit about. Anyway, we're going to be adding testing events. So that, coupled with the other avenues for testing, should give people plenty of opportunity, as well as the pooled testing pilot that's going to happen. So there are avenues to be tested. I'm hoping we can maintain those levels and people don't have a false insecurity in that our positivity rate and our cases are starting to decline. I don't want people to think we're out of the woods yet. Right. And so I do hope that the numbers of people being tested remains high or even higher, quite honestly, because it's still necessary until we get more of the population vaccinated and see how that's going to play out. It's very necessary tool that we have, and people should take advantage of it. Absolutely.
And the post-February vacation?
Yes. So I was wondering that myself, how that would play out. And so far, it looks good. I think we would see, while it's early, I realize it's Tuesday, I do believe we would have seen some indication of the effects of people's behavior over break. If they, traveled, or if they, because not everybody necessarily goes away for the entire week. Not everybody or goes away at all, but may engage locally in activities that may be riskier. And we're not seeing that yet. And again, I need to knock on wood because.
Right. Yes, you and me both.
But no, I'm not seeing any indication of that as of yet. So, and I do truly believe that we would have.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Marchant, your hand is raised.
Thank you. My question has to do with variances in the virus. Are you able to capture that through the testing that's being done, whether we're seeing variances, whether there's any impact on our schools or schools in general in terms of the more infectious ones?
Right. So the gene sequencing for the variants that have been identified worldwide is being conducted in Massachusetts. I don't believe, excuse me, every case. I think they are taking, a select few, a random selection of confirmed tests to do further analysis on those. I think so far they have identified the South African mutation as well as the UK mutation here in Massachusetts. How long it's been around is up for debate. I think once it's officially identified, you can assume, or be naive to not assume, that it hasn't been around long, right? So sequencing is being done to identify it, but not every case. If one of our cases were to be identified as being a variant, they would inform us, and we would inform the patient. But we have not been informed of that, is the answer to your question, of any of our cases thus far.
Any additional questions or comments on this presentation that Ms. Murphy gave?
Mr. Chair, I'll hold questions for later because I know we have more to the discussion, but I just want to jump in and ask the folks at WinCam, let them know we have another Windows box popped up on the broadcast tonight, if they can bring that down for folks watching at home. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bolognese, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I just had a follow-up to Ms. Marchant's question. You had mentioned that sequencing was being done, but not every case. And I was just wondering what would trigger sequencing to be done? Is there anything that triggers it?
Yeah, I don't know what the criteria are, quite honestly. I'm sure international travel may play a factor in that, although I don't know, what percentage of targeted versus randomized the state is using. I don't know the formula. I'm happy to find out, and I can, or pose the question to the state, and I can get back to you if they answer me.
Thank you so much. I have a quick clarification question. As far as the total number of tests performed, I know we haven't talked about pool testing, and we will be talking about it a little bit later. Would a pool testing count as, how would that factor into the data that you report? If a pool tests 20 people, is that 20 and they're all negative? Is that 20 additional negatives, or is that one a negative as far as when you put the number of tests and the percent positivity and everything?
Excuse me. So I'm sorry. The official test results that will be reported to the state are the individual's test results. So if a pool is negative, nothing will be reported to the state, right? So if we have a positive pool, everyone will be sampled individually. And those results, the individual's results, will be reported to the state and added to the data set, the official data set.
Okay, so the number of tests that you have on one of your charts, you have the number of tests and the number of positives. That denominator of the number of tests would not include those pool tests. I just wanted to understand. So I think that's important as we go forward. If that the chart will have that sort of caveat as we roll out pool testing.
Yes.
Thank you. Seeing no additional questions, I would welcome some. You had some other things you were going to share with us. Some questions.
Sorry. So I just wanted to mention that my office is in the process now of setting up community-wide testing. It would be available to any resident as well as any town employee on a weekly basis, perhaps twice a week. Still working out the details and also trying to find, we're going to pilot this for 1 or 2 weeks to find out what works best for the majority of people, different times, different days. I was hoping to start on a Saturday and see how that went. But in fact, I was hoping to start this coming Saturday, and it doesn't look like the ducks are in a row to make that happen. So it'll be the following week. But that will be something offered to the public very soon. At first, there will be no charge for that. However, going forward, we may need to charge a nominal fee for that to recoup some of the money because it's not inexpensive. There will be a max on the number of tests we conduct in a week, so it should be somewhere in the range of 360 people weekly.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, could I just touch on vaccination efforts?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
So we have conducted visits to homebound people in our community. Kathy Whitaker spent 3 days going to everyone's home that we know have mobility issues and cannot leave their house. So we did do that, which we are happy to acquire the vaccine to be able to do that. That was a great achievement. And if there are any other people out there in the community who we weren't able to reach because they didn't self-identify or we haven't known of them from previous interactions, to please call the health department. We will be holding clinics at the 2 housing authority properties, which is also great. That should be happening in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, however, the governor has scaled back, as I'm sure you've heard, the ability for local health departments to vaccinate beyond those 2 initiatives. Unfortunately, we were very, very disappointed that we cannot be part of this solution, part of this cure. After a year of dealing with this, it's disappointing. I'll leave it there. But hopefully at some point he'll change his mind and to allow us to do something that we know we can do well. We know our community well. We know our residents the best. We know how to deliver the vaccine to large volumes of people in an efficient way. And so, we know we can do it. We're waiting for the vaccine to be able to do it. But for now, we'll take care of the 2 goals that I just mentioned, the 2 targeted groups.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bergstrom, your question on the vaccination?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Murphy, does that mean if the state has scaled back the ability of local health departments to do vaccinations, does that mean that when we reach the educators in the priority line for vaccinations, that will not also be conducted locally and that teachers will have to seek that out in other locations, or do we not have that information yet?
I don't have that information. However, there is a large movement to put the pressure on the governor. And I know the MMA, Mass Municipal Association, wrote a letter specifically speaking to this point and advocating that local health be involved in delivering the vaccine to the school community, the staff, because it is the most efficient way to get it done. However, we don't want to slow up the process either. So, if the governor assures everyone that this can be done in a better manner, a more efficient way, then he can have at it. However, I would argue that we can certainly get it done. Give us the vaccine, we will get it done. However, it does remain an unanswered question, but we have not stopped advocating that this happen at a local level.
And then just out of curiosity in your thought process, would you then be sort of rolling that out over time? Because I can imagine with the symptoms that are experienced sometimes immediately following the vaccine, we might have to space that out if we had the ability to do it locally with our staff so they weren't all experiencing symptoms on the same day.
Yeah, sure. So, right. No, and that was certainly a consideration when we did first responders, right? So you can't have all your fire and police feeling ill at the same time, the same shift. So, yes, there's certainly ways that we can minimize impact. The good news is, people for the most part have been able to, while they felt a little off, a little ill, it hasn't been too severe. But certainly we do want to take that into consideration, and we will. Certainly there's a way to make that happen without impacting the school community too much.
Great, thank you. And your point about first responders, having done it already with first responders, is a good one. It's nice to know that it's a process you guys have already tackled and you're on top of it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. If I could just add a comment, Brian, to that. The great concern that school superintendents, district superintendents have about not doing the vaccination process in district is that if our individual educators have to fight for whatever available slots are open at a vaccination site that might be far away, like Gillette, they may lose half a day from instruction or a full day from instruction. And we would never hold anyone back from getting vaccinated at the earliest opportunity, but it's going to be extremely disruptive, and we just don't have the staff to cover a lot of people leaving at unexpected times throughout the week. And we have hundreds and hundreds of employees, so it's a lot of people who need to get vaccinated, and asking them to seek out their own slot, and giving them a lot of flexibility to go and do that during the school day is going to be extremely challenging. We had hoped that we could actually do it. We would have hoped to do it sometime during the vacation period. Ideally, we would have hoped, that anybody available around could have done it on a non-school day. And so we're extremely disappointed that these huge vaccination sites are really the choice of the state. Public health folks and our nurses are extremely adept at vaccinating. We vaccinate our kids for the flu and HPV, and I think we're really pretty cutting edge and have it all down and could do it easily with minimal disruption. And so anyone out there listening, or anyone on school committee who can get that across to the governor would be extremely well received by us, because we are greatly concerned about the rollout of this process. No, it's not only, and if it's a two-step vaccine, it means people missing work twice for the initial and the second shot. So that is a concern to us.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Mr. Nixon.
Well, I was just on that very point. I was going to wonder, Dr. Evans, if maybe MASS wants to co-sign that letter from the Mass Municipal Association along with the Mass Teachers Association and MASC. It's an excellent point. I mean, to my mind, the idea of mass vaccination sites are logistically much easier on the state side, because we're talking about millions and millions of doses. So the idea that they have to go to far fewer number of sites, facilities that are designed to accommodate large numbers of people, certainly makes the lift a little bit easier on the state side and puts the burden on everybody else to get there, and the consequences for being away from work or family or kids or what have you. So really my question now is to the chair, to the superintendent, because we have a number of sort of sub bullets on this topic tonight for conversation around COVID and planning and so forth. And we did hear during public comment reference to an email the superintendent sent out with some thoughts towards a subcommittee with some, planning for the spring. Will we be hearing more about that? Is there an opportunity to talk a bit about that, Mr. Chairman, either tonight or now or soon? If so, I had some questions for Ms. Murphy, but I don't want to sort of take those questions out of turn.
So, Mr. Nixon, we were being respectful of Ms. Murphy's time, so we wanted to get sort of what she could convey with us and anything presentation, any sort of questions from her. Then I would turn it back over to Dr. Evans, and hopefully Ms. Murphy could stay on a little bit longer as we talked about things, again, sort of under the health department's purview. And then at that point in time, we probably will continue on, because I know Dr. Evans has intention to talk about a number of the things that, as you mentioned, on the COVID-19 district update. So I would I would focus on any questions you have from Ms. Murphy, and at the end of the presentation, at the end of what Dr. Evans has to present, come back to anything for her.
So I appreciate that. I may have some questions for her when we get to the sort of the planning discussion. The only other question that I had, because we have Winchester is well represented by our healthcare community, from a variety of first responders and hospitalists and so forth, folks who are certainly for a while now been eligible for the vaccine. Is there some clearinghouse where do we have a sense, Ms. Murphy, of the number or percentage of Winchester residents who've actually been vaccinated, given that that's an industry that's had the opportunity for a while?
That is a good question that I don't have the answer to, honestly. And I don't know that the state that I know of has published anything around that in terms of the town level. So I
So
can
in other
certainly
words-
ask if, sorry.
Yeah. So no, I mean, so it seems to me the only vaccinations you know about are the ones that you all have been administering. There's no way to know just because you live in Winchester and you work at one of our many fine hospitals and you got the vaccine, that's not being recorded somewhere. But given how strongly medicine is represented one way or another as an industry in Winchester among our residents, and for crying out loud, there's a hospital with Winchester's name in it 2 blocks from me. So a lot of folks who live here work there as well. It seems to me we might be afforded some maybe larger protection that just comes with those folks having an early shot at the vaccine. I'd be really interested in knowing if there's a way to knit that together and get a sense of sort of percentage of those vaccinated among the adult community, because that is one of the many issues in the back of my mind when we talk about return to school. I have no expectation that there will be an emergency use authorization for a vaccine for kids who are in kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade. I mean, right now, I think it's 16 and up. So that needle might move a little bit. We might learn before summer is here that vaccine is now eligible for students as young as 6th grade. But our conversation around getting kids back to school at the elementary level means they're not vaccinated. And we talk about teachers and staff, but because kids can carry COVID and spread COVID, albeit lower viral loads, so we understand at a lower rate, we still have adults in the household. And I think there are legitimate concerns in the community about community spread sort of through that vector, if you will. So it just gives me some comfort if there was a way for us to understand either number-wise or percentage-wise who are the adults who've had the vaccine. I don't know how you would go about getting that information, but I think it might be useful.
Thank you.
Yep, I will ask.
Thank you. So, Ms. Murphy, if you could stay with us for a little bit, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Evans, because I know she had a number of things she was going to speak on, and certainly we would love your feedback on any of those. I know that I also am in particular interested in. I know Dr. Evans mentioned sort of the new guidance, the new guidance from DESE, but also I'm curious about the CDC guidance and how much of that has sort of flowed down to Mass Department of Public Health, and how much is still sort of at the federal level, but not yet adopted at the state level. So I don't know if those are sort of general questions, but I don't know if there's anything you can say on either one of them.
Yes, so the CDC did publish updated guidance around those who are vaccinated. And just to be clear, the state of Massachusetts is right now still considering adoption of those recommendations, but as of right now have not adopted them. So for example, a person who has been fully vaccinated, if they are exposed to a positive case, the CDC has suggested that there's a change in quarantine, right, for that person. We have not changed our protocol for quarantine. So if there is an exposure, that person who is even fully vaccinated as of right now has to abide by the full quarantine protocol, which entails staying at home until day 5, testing, blah, 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 and on and on. So no, the state of Massachusetts is currently considering adoption. The COVID Command Center is reviewing the recommendations that the State Department of Public Health has issued to them. So in other words, the governor has the final say. DPH has made their recommendations. It is now in the governor's hands to adopt or not, or tweak them as he sees fit. And then we will hear about what is finally decided.
Thank you very much. Dr. Evans, I don't know if you want to sort of, I know you had a number of issues you were going to discuss and present on, and move from there, or if not?
I'd be happy to. So touching briefly on the CDC recommendations, I think it's really important for us to avoid misinformation about the CDC recommendations, which are published in detail on the CDC website. I've shared with you both a summary of those, a 2-page summary, and the full document. One of the things that strikes me about the CDC recommendations, which also include some information about rates per 100,000 residents in a community and kind of how that relates to whether schools should be open in hybrid form or more fully open or closed. And it's, if you read that section of the report, it seems pretty clear that by the CDC guidelines, most of our schools should be closed because the rate of community spread is quite high by their standards. However, I think in Massachusetts, we all started out with some metrics that would have had us closed many times, and we've been able to clear that through the other mitigation strategies that the CDC recommends in their report, which include masking, 6-foot distancing, cohorting, cleaning and disinfection, all of the things that we originally had incorporated as part of our return to school plan. And there are some other elements in there that I think are really helpful to us that reinforce that we're able to keep schools open safely through our hybrid model and have limited in-school spread, although not zero. And certainly I've heard lots of assertions by both the governor and the commissioner saying that students have low rates of infection and don't spread it to others easily. That is not necessarily the case and not our experience. But what I would say is diligent contact tracing has been key to our ability to stay open. The lengths to which the contact tracers through the health department have been able to track down, quarantine, contact, follow up with students and their families has really been extremely beneficial to us. And the cohorting of our students has often meant that students were not infectious while in school. And the contact tracing has borne evidence that the tracing has worked well because we've successfully identified those in-school contacts and quarantined them, and very few of them have actually become positive after that. And I think it's important to note that we have also positive cases among our faculty and staff, and that public health assists us with that, as do our nurses and our administrators. And we have many staff members who have been quarantined as close contacts outside of school, either through their own family members or through their, in their own towns, contacts with others through public health notification in those towns. And so it's not just the cases in town, but it is the cases and the quarantining of staff members that has an impact on our ability to deliver instruction and keep our schools open. So one of the things that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the CDC do not agree on is that the commissioner and the governor assert and local medical professionals assert it's perfectly safe to have students back at 3 feet. And while there are very few schools who are currently back in full at 3 feet with 20 or 25 students in a classroom, the data from other places is really mixed on that front, where some school districts, including a case I read today from the CDC, have shown considerable spread from teachers to students and vice versa when the distance is less than 6 feet. And so we need to be really cautious and have our data clear and our analysis clear about what the risk is. And there are cost benefits to every decision that we make. And one of the things that we've tried to really stay on top of is, what does the science say? What does the CDC say? What does the DESE say? What does the public health at the state level say? What has been our own experience as we've really closely watched this? And it is extremely frustrating when there's conflicting advice coming from experts and conflicting advice coming from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the governor, and the CDC. And so we have to rely on our own best judgment, because while there was a press conference today and an announcement by the commissioner that he is now going to recommend to the Board of Education that they withdraw their approval for the hybrid model, that the only learning time that will count will be in-school learning time, that all students should be in K-5 should be back in school in April. They have not given us a roadmap to get there or any additional guidance on how to do that safely, which is, again, extremely frustrating. In a state where there are 300 plus school districts, each school district and superintendent and school committee and public health in that town is forced to try to make the best decisions that are possible for students and families and staff members. And these are life and death decisions that have implications for not only immediate illness, but possibly continuing disability for some people who have COVID-related syndromes after they've been infected. So we are cautious. We have been looking at this data. And one of the things I think that would be helpful for Jen Murphy to talk about is how would the contact tracing shift if we suddenly had classes of 20 or 25 where students were 3 feet or less from the teacher all day in a classroom? And what do you think the impact might be on quarantining and our schools in general? And so I just wanted to throw that out to her to see if she had thought about that or had any opinions.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Ms. Murphy, if you have any thoughts on that, we would welcome them.
Well, what's interesting is I think it was Secretary Pazer was interviewed this past weekend, and he said 15% of school districts have returned to full occupancy successfully. And yet, if you ask for any data around that, what that looks like, how they define success, there is none. It is not published. It is not shared. I have asked DPH. I've asked DESE myself. So I feel like that is a very big piece of information we need to know about, right? How did they define success? What does the data look like around those 15% that have returned full occupancy? Because I think we can't have an informed discussion without. But certainly it will be, an extension of this great experiment for us. I can speak to a little bit of our data, the times that we had transmission that was most likely in school. There was distancing violations that contributed to the spread, even with masks on. Less than 6 feet. Certainly, I don't know the exact distance, but it was less than 6 feet for sure. And so I do think distance plays a role in being protective. It's been proven. But that being said, though, if there were a negative impact, and we saw cases start to rise, obviously it would burden the system. It would burden our contact tracers. It would be more difficult to contain the spread in a timely way. It would be more interruptions for school days because we would have to allow ourselves time to effectively contain spread. We would need more testing. So we're talking about more staff power to get kids tested and to try to control that. So I think there are a lot of implications. I think I have concerns. I have concerns, especially around a lunchtime period. You said DESE didn't issue new guidance. You can't eat lunch without a mask. So, with a mask. So what would that look like? Are they suggesting that we maintain 6 foot distance? And if so, it continues to be a logistical spacing issue within our school buildings. So without the guidance, without more data, I don't feel like I'd be giving a very informed opinion at this point. Would I be willing to investigate it and go forward? Absolutely. We should research that further and have those discussions, because if they're saying that it can be done safely, well then let's pursue it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murphy. Before we go back to you, Dr. Evans, Ms. Marchant has her hand raised.
Thank you. I'm going to take a minute to put the governor's mismanagement on blast here. Recently, I saw Dr. Walensky on CNN, and she made it very clear that as long as schools had the mitigating efforts in place, that we could start to move into in-person. And she was very clear that that meant hybrid, not necessarily full in-person. The governor has not taken into account variances and the more viral and transmissible and deadliness of them. He has not considered how cohorting will be impacted, therefore raising rates in our schools. He has not looked into our facility concerns. New York Times was just talking about the concern is not about student to student transmission as much as it is about the adults in the buildings transmitting the virus more than the kids. He has not prioritized our teachers for vaccinations. And as Jen Murphy just stated, how he is making the vaccination process even more muddled and ineffective. He is not his department hasn't even followed through on the quarantine guidelines that have been changing. He has not considered our contact tracing protocols and how his now announcement of magically everyone needs to go back to school, how that will be impacted. He is being incredibly irresponsible, and this has life and death consequences. I don't understand how he can continue to talk about reopening schools when he has not even considered in the budget of compensating districts for all the students that are coming back. Everybody talks about, I believe the number was 30,000, Dr. Evans, please correct me if I'm wrong, of kids who pulled out last year, and especially in the K-1 age group. They're all coming back next year. He has not said that he is going to take those numbers into account rather than the new lower numbers. He has today, Senator Lewis was talking about how the state's tax receipts are not as negatively impacted as was expected, yet the governor still does not fully fund the pandemic impact on schools. This is so disgusting because all it's doing, and this is a message to our parent community, especially the ones who are asking us to go full return in person. I feel it, I understand it, but it is so irresponsible of our governor and of the DESE commissioner to now pit our teachers who are struggling with mental health issues, being worn out, and all of the impacts of this pandemic, pitting them against our parents who are asking us to please bring back all of the students, given the impact on the students themselves. The irresponsibility is so deep, and if it is not stopped, it could cost lives. If nothing else, it could cost us in public education, our efforts in moving in the right direction. We have done, thanks to Dr. Evans and Jen Murphy and all of our staff, an incredible job putting together a hybrid model that works, a hybrid model that allows families to go remote if they need to. And this tactic of bullying from the state is absolutely unacceptable. I stand with our public health department. I stand with our administration and saying that's enough. This is not a workable approach to public education. And our students are vulnerable to this, and our teachers are vulnerable. And so I just needed to make that statement for my conscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marchant. Appreciate it. Ms. Murphy, I have a question, unless you want to speak to anything that was just said, a question about, in practical terms, if tomorrow we had all of our students back at 3-foot distance and one of our students came home and tested positive, what would that mean as far as practical situations, as far as contact tracing and as far as quarantining? Just to sort of walk us through what that would look like. There's 18 kids in a class. They're not 6 feet apart. Neither is the teacher. And one kid comes home that night and says, I don't feel so good. And then they get tested and they're positive. What would that look like as far as contact tracing and quarantining?
Right. So we're assuming the desks are at 6 feet. 3 feet. Yep, 3 feet.
Yeah. I know it's a hypothetical, and you probably hate hypotheticals, but people are asking us to look at scenarios, and I think this is a realistic scenario to understand.
Right, sure. So assuming though the protocol is to quarantine anyone within 6 feet of a child, of a student or staff member, you would have to automatically assume that any desk in that immediate range of 6 feet, those students would need to be quarantined, right? So that means they'll all be out of school following the protocol, out for a minimum of 5 days. If they test, they can test out, or they're out for 10 days with strict quarantine, non-testing. So right away, that's at minimum, never mind, who else they've interacted with at lunch, in sports, the usual, what we're pursuing now. So it's an automatic, radius out from that one desk automatically.
Okay.
To follow up with that within the 6 foot distance. So
that's helpful. That's helpful. Just helpful to understand. And as of right now, if the desks are spaced 6 feet apart, that automatic radius, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does not automatically result in a quarantining of people sitting 6 feet apart.
That's correct. That's correct. That's how we've avoided this, right? We have kept kids in school because of that exact spacing issue, and it's worked. It really has worked. And so no, that would disappear, and it would be any student in that immediate vicinity of that positive child, any desk in that vicinity. So in front, on the sides, in the back, automatically those 4 kids, if that's how the desks are situated, right, in rows, would be quarantined.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Bergstrom, I don't know who raised their hand first. I'll go with you, Ms. Bergstrom, first.
Thanks, Brian. I have a question for Ms. Murphy and then one for Dr. Evans. Ms. Murphy, I'll start with you. I appreciate everything Ms. Marchand said, but I guess I'm looking to a time where it may no longer be our choice of whether we have to bring our kids back or not. So I'm trying to understand kind of what we value most around the parameters of the safety measures that we put in place. Because obviously, if we're going to bring all of our students back full time, something is going to have to give somewhere. It's going to either have to be distancing or cohorting, or whether our students stay for lunch. Sort of those things that we may have to make flips on. Are there things that you think you value more than others from a public health perspective? Are there things that you can attribute our success to more than others? For example, is distancing more important than cohorting? Is not being 3 feet away from each other at lunch? Like if we could have our elementary students go home for lunch, like ideally, and I know it might be an impossible question, but if you have any information or that you can use from your experience to weigh in on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so I do think that there are a couple things. One is certainly unmasked lunchtime is a top concern, especially if we're talking 3 feet. That just, in my mind, doesn't seem like it should happen at all, especially unmasked. You need greater distance if you're. I think everybody could agree with that, right? So there's a top consideration is unmasked lunchtime. Can it be done another way? Can kids eat at home rather than be in school and be less than 6 feet eating lunch? So that's something to think about. Certainly, the distancing in my mind that I've seen in our small subset of data that we can attribute to the transmission in school, certainly it was distancing that played a role in that transmission, even with a mask on, I might add. So the distancing in and of itself played a role, not just one time, in a couple times. So, and then after that, certainly, any unmasked time that you are coupled with the distancing, obviously, is not a good idea. So, I think right off the top of my head, of thinking about our cases and thinking about our data, those would be top concerns for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Especially if we're talking about a duration of time. Again, keep in mind we're not talking about little bits of time, a minute here, a minute there. We're talking about, if you're going to have a lunch period with kids, if you're going to have a classroom period with kids. So a sustained period of time, not just a minute here, a minute there.
Thank you. That's really helpful because, sometimes we do have to think about like the priorities, what's most important to sort of value to maintain in any mitigation strategies. And that's really helpful. Dr. Evans, I just want to be clear on something for a minute because I think that there was a lot of information that sort of hit the news today and came out from the state and a lot of reactions from folks on both sides. Frankly, every stakeholder group had some kind of reaction to what they heard today. And I just want to reflect for a moment on what we actually did here, because there was a press conference where Commissioner Riley spoke, and he did speak this morning at a Board of Education meeting. But my understanding at this time was that this was not yet new guidance or a new mandate as of today, but it was sort of a heads up from Commissioner Riley of what he may be proposing to the Board of Education in the coming weeks, and that the Board of Education would then have to vote on a plan that Commissioner Riley would put forward, and that would not happen until a March meeting. And that I also reflect back on last March when there was a lot of changing sort of guidance coming out from the state. And I'd also like to reflect on what's sort of in our local control here as a school committee and what the Department of Education still can have control over for us. And I believe that would relate mostly to our student learning time on learning, because the commissioner issued a waiver for that for districts at the beginning of the school year. And so could you sort of, I guess, opine on those issues for us? Let us know where we are and sort of like everybody's sort of take a deep breath yet, because I don't believe we exactly know exactly what's coming yet.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm cognizant of Ms. Murphy's time. A lot of these things relate to student learning time, and I can talk about the impact of the 3 or 4 changes that actually have gone through the Board of Ed on this. Is there anything else for Ms. Murphy before we let her go? And then I can tackle that question.
So Ms. Bergstrom, if you'd be willing to hold that question,
Yep.
and we'll go to Mr. Nixon.
Well, I wasn't sure if Michelle had a follow-up question. So I guess I want to be mindful of my time here, given I'm interrupting Ms. Bergstrom.
Not at all. Your time is yours now.
Okay, so I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. I wanted to share some public thoughts similar to what Ms. Marchant did. We had some folks during public comment, I think, refer to they were excited by the press conference today. I want to be clear, I was actually really frustrated and underwhelmed by the press conference. I was tuned in at 2 o'clock sharp to see what I was going to learn, because I was aware of the statements the commissioner made to DESE this morning. And what I was looking for were some details. And I feel like Jeff Riley wasted his trip to Boston because he got introduced, he read from a statement, and I think he came to the podium twice. It was about a 48-minute press conference. I'm just as disappointed at the Boston press corps, because I felt what they really wanted to do was beat up on Governor Baker on the vaccine rollout. And he wanted to tell how we're number one in our peer states. What is a peer state? Well, that's a state with our population or greater, and there are 24 of them. I think that was said 3 or 4 times. The purpose of that press conference was for the commissioner to tell us more about the authority he plans to request of the board, which is just what Ms. Bergstrom was talking about. I'm alarmed when I hear that, remote time will no longer be considered eligible and counting towards the total credit for the year. Only the one piece I heard was an acknowledgement from the commissioner that they would entertain waivers. I don't really know what that means. I heard loudly that they want our younger learners in school 5 days a week. I did not hear them say that they're supposed to be in school 5 days a week until the bell rings at 2:30 in the afternoon. So I appreciate that Ms. Murphy is here, because in the summer and in the fall, she said very clearly her 3 primary concerns from a public health point of view, and I think I get the order right, Ms. Murphy. It was open lunch, it was athletics and transportation, or maybe I have the last 2 backwards. I would like to know, so I'll put this question out there and come back to it in a moment. My sense is, I know we've had some incidences of spread within sort of the athletics realm, but my sense is we've caught that pretty quickly. We've managed that, reacted to it. When teams need to go on quarantine, they do. My sense is the transportation piece has been working pretty well. My sense is the lunch has been working pretty well. But, we've got, I think, 12-foot tables at Morocco. We put one kid at one end, one in the other, and one in the middle. And so that's why it's working. So in my mind, what I thought we would be talking about tonight, as I was thinking about this, frankly, just 48 hours ago before the announcement came today, and I've shared this with some of my, parent peers in the community who are eager to know what's going to happen in the spring. Are kids going to come back? And I've said, well, we've talked about this. And the superintendent has acknowledged that if there's the opportunity to bring kids back, even in May or June, we would do that. We have to kind of see what happens, both in terms of how the infection remains under control and also with respect to vaccine availability and vaccination. So I was really looking forward tonight because I thought we might throw out different scenarios to the superintendent at a very high level and say, once again, this was never supposed to be binary. This was never supposed to be a switch that was thrown. I think we've said that many times, that getting back to whatever the new normal is may take a series of steps. I was hopeful we might find a way to get our younger learners back in school 5 days a week, but that might be a day that stops at a lunch hour, maybe a slightly postponed lunch hour. Kids go home for lunch. Then what? Do we do remote for specials like for art, music, PE? Well, the good news is that's actually what's happening now. There's a model for that. Would that work? Based on the press conference today, I still have no idea because I don't know if a waiver for something like that would be considered. The CDC guidelines that Dr. Evans was just mentioning in her opening remarks that she did share with the committee have they're dated February 14th. So they're a week old. CDC guidelines say wherever possible, maximum distance, but wherever possible, 6 feet is recommended. How can I square that with what I'm hearing today from the state? Well, possibly if we might be allowed to look at a modified school day and kids are going home for lunch, that means perhaps we can repurpose cafeterias and music rooms and art rooms for instruction, maybe. But I don't know that that's really a solution because new physical spaces need new physical teachers. Where are the teachers going to come from? So there's so many operational impacts associated with this. I also enjoyed Senator Lewis's meeting today that Ms. Marchant mentioned. Superintendent was able to join for part of that. So did Ms. Bergstrom. And what really came out very clearly to me was how frustrated so many area school committee members and superintendents were with this surprise announcement. I wish it had simply been more of an encouragement for districts to take this challenge on, which I feel like, in my honest opinion, I feel like our administration has been working hard to try to find some solutions towards this. I know some parents may feel that's not the case, but I believe that to be the case. So I share Ms. Marchant's disappointment in sort of the sledgehammer method in which this was delivered today. I would just offer that the relatively low rate of school-based spread, I think, is a direct relation to all the things that we're doing. I think Ms. Murphy just spoke to that very well. In my mind, that includes the distancing. I share her concern about open lunch, masks coming off 3 feet separated. I think I heard the commissioner say in his remarks today, some districts, kids are 2 feet apart. I'd like to see that classroom. I was really having a hard time imagining that. Shoulders must be rubbing in a situation like that. Ms. Murphy, I thought you hit it on the head when you said, if the secretary says there are 15% of districts have returned safely, show us the data. We like to think we're a data-driven community. I know that we are. The state should be as well, and I think we need to keep pushing for that. My last remark simply would be, I think it was a very detailed, thoughtful email the superintendent sent out earlier today. To the extent we have kind of a subgroup of our COVID planning team that's beginning to look at some options, my hope and my expectation is that it includes Ms. Murphy or maybe her designee, because I realize she's busy. I think it should include at least one school committee member. if we can get Ms. Markham, our nurse leader, on board, or some other, district nursing staff that superintendent feels is appropriate, I think that would be helpful. And it may have already been presumed that those people would be participating. But I want to be really clear that I put more stake in what Ms. Murphy thinks and feels and says about public health in Winchester than I do the commissioner of DESE or the governor, neither of whom had the state's public health director standing with them today for what I'm told was a press conference. So I think, Ms. Murphy, you keep up the good work. You're doing a great job. I know it's a heavy lift for everybody. I want to get kids back to school as soon as anybody else does, but I want to be thoughtful about it. And there, I like to say, crawl, walk, run. We got to do some walking before we do some running. And I hope that we can all be respectful of one another as we try to figure out how to get there. Speech is complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nixon. I will say that I quoted you the other day to somebody else when I said crawl, walk, run. I said, as Mr. Nixon, I might have even said, as Mr. Nixon would say, and then quoted you. So thank you. I do want to be mindful of Ms. Murphy's time. I know we have more on this topic, but I'm going to go to Ms. Bolognese. And then if we're done with issues that we want to actually shackle Ms. Murphy to her computer for the evening with, we can then move on to other less strictly health related and operational. So Ms. Bolognese.
Thank you very much. I guess I had also had the question for Ms. Murphy or Dr. Evans about what things would look like if we were to come back at 3 feet distance. I know you had just addressed elementary school situations, but if we were looking at the older students, if we were looking at middle school or high school, I guess is what I'm thinking of. I know that at the conference today, the commissioner was talking about seeing 6 through 12 back by the end of the year as well. But if we were to come back at 3 feet distance, then what would our contact tracing look like for a high schooler or middle school? I guess particularly high school.
Sure. I don't know if you want to speak to that. In general, if students were fully back 5 days a week at the high school, I tweeted recently a picture of one of our cohorts in a classroom, and I counted 14 students. And if anyone looked at that picture, those kids were, the 6 foot apart is a little bit questionable. Many of our classrooms cannot fit a full room at 3 feet, particularly at the high school or the middle school, a full class of students. Certainly you can't fit, you couldn't have fit 28 students in that class safely. Even at 3 feet, they would have been shoulder to shoulder, as they are in a normal year where we have, our classrooms are pretty packed. So students who had a regular course load who went from class to class, it would mean every time you had a positive case, you'd probably have 30 or more students quarantined as a result of that positive case, and perhaps several teachers, depending where the students sat in class. And, my main concern always has been primarily the health of everyone involved, but secondarily, just being able to keep operations going and finding substitutes for staff members who are quarantined has been extraordinarily difficult, even at half usage of the schools with only half of the students there or fewer than at the elementary level. We have 20% of our students who are full remote, smaller percent at the middle and high school. So even with fewer students in a school, the impact when there's a positive case and 1 or 2 staff members are quarantined is significant. And if we have several teachers quarantined as a result of a single student or other teacher who's positive, other staff member who's positive, it really could mean that our schools are shut down frequently or classrooms are shut down frequently because I just don't have the staff to safely keep a building open. So anything I forgot there, Jen, that you want to? Right. So I would say it could be 30 to 50 people quarantined every time there's a positive case. Just, depending on how many students are in their classes and how many people are around them and where they've been. So I would want to just say one thing about the lunches. The state said there's really no excuse for not spreading kids out through the whole school at lunch, have them sit in the hallway, have them sit in their classrooms. You can find a way to have everybody 6 feet apart at lunch. I would submit that the people who say those things have never actually run a school lunch, because it takes a lot of supervision, especially at the elementary level. Kids need their milks open. They need their yogurt containers, cover off. They need adults supervising them. And you can't, unlike the high school where we can spread kids out more easily and send some off, juniors and seniors off to eat off campus. You can't spread, 75 first graders out over a great distance without a lot of adults to supervise them. It's another supervision issue for us, and it's a cleaning issue. Kids eating lunch all over the building require a lot of cleanup, and our custodians and our contract cleaners are busy doing all of the disinfection and the regular cleanup of frequently touched surfaces. They're just all over the building all the time, cleaning. If we spread lunch out beyond the spaces where we're currently doing lunch, I have concerns about our capacity to manage that well. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Not to mention, concern with rodents and other things if you have lunch, remnants everywhere all over your building. So
don't say that in front of the health director. We don't want to get closed down.
So there, and I know we want to let Jen go. It's after 8, but what I would say is the health department, and I'm pleased to see the praise for the health department because Jen has sent Jessica Pfefferman to us to help out with this pool testing. They've been extraordinarily cooperative and direct and transparent, and it's been a wonderful collaborative relationship. We're going to face a lot of challenges in the next few months as we transition more students back, and it may require more support from the town in terms of hiring more contact tracers or other support personnel. So we'd like to make sure that we are aware of the impact on the town and the health department and DPW of every decision we make as well.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. I would like to continue on this discussion, but I would like to, if we can, allow Ms. Murphy to have her dinner and go back to the rest of her evening. And knowing that she will obviously answer any questions we have even later on. So Ms. Murphy, unless you have any final thoughts, you're certainly welcome to stay, but I do want to give you your freedom.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for your kind words. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Evans, I know you had a number of other things. Again, they're more operational, and I was hoping that you could continue on because I believe there were a couple issues around pool testing and sports and things that you were going to mention to us.
So let me go back to the question that Michelle Bergstrom asked about the process for compelling schools to move back full and in person all day, 5 days a week, which grade levels, how soon is it going to happen? So unlike Winchester, we started right out of the gate with a hybrid model and had kids in school every day and have had kids in school every day since the beginning of the school year. Some districts have really struggled with the process of bringing students into school. They've had HVAC concerns, they've had staffing concerns, et cetera. And so they've had very high rates of transmission in their communities. They've had a number of issues that have resulted in them using a full remote approach. The commissioner and the Board of Education have been very concerned about this and concerned about the impact of students who were disengaged from school and were experiencing mental health challenges. So some months ago, the Board of Education, with very little public notice and not much discussion, implemented changes to student learning time that required school districts to provide a certain number of hours of instruction via direct teacher contact, and that could either be in person or via technology, but did not include asynchronous learning in that. And so twice now, districts have had to submit detailed average student schedules for several grade levels to show that we are in compliance with the minimum number of hours of student learning time. The unintended consequence of this is that for districts like ours, it actually put more restrictions on our flexibility in bringing students back. For example, we were fairly close to bringing students back for some Wednesday morning experiences, but because students are taught as a whole class on Wednesday mornings, to have some students come back on Wednesday mornings would mean the other students would have to learn asynchronously and not have teachers working with them, which would reduce on average the number of hours of instruction, direct instruction, by 3 hours for every 2 weeks for students, which would have meant we would have been out of compliance. And so restrictions like that have unintended consequences. It would be much easier for us to meet the student learning time regulations if we placed a whole class in front of computers and had teachers teach them remotely than it is to have our combination of hybrid and full remote instruction that we so highly value. So why had we not moved ahead with more Wednesday plans? It's because then we would be out of compliance with the student learning time regulations passed by the Board of Education. So unexpectedly today, I have been well aware that the commissioner wants more students back in school in person. I want more students back in school in person. I deeply want that, but I feel a responsibility to make sure we do it safely. And every district has different challenges. And it's very heartbreaking for us to get emails saying, I heard of a district on the South Shore that's brought students back for more time. Why can't we do it? We're Winchester. And when I investigate, I often find that that other district has many more empty classrooms, has additional staff, has additional resources, and in fact doesn't have a full classroom of 22 students, but has broken that into 2 groups of students with 2 teachers or an aide watching a group of students in a different room. And so they may be back in person, but they're not back with their own teacher often. And so, or they may be blessed with very small class sizes to begin with, and they can welcome everyone back. They might have larger classrooms. Every district has different strengths and challenges when it comes to meeting this complex problem. And so the commissioner's announcement today is that he is going to ask the Board of Education to rescind their approval of the instructional hours the minimum number of instructional hours that they were expecting districts to provide every 2 weeks, to do away with that and go back to the original student learning time regulations, which before COVID were 900 hours for elementary and 990 hours of instruction for secondary, not including lunches and study halls and passing time and those sorts of things. So we've worked hard to increase instructional time in the district slightly, making a longer elementary day, looking at school start time, making sure that our students had enough instructional time. And so if the Board of Ed accepts the recommendation of the commissioner to rescind the 1-year SLT student learning time regulations that they recently passed, he's trying to use that as an incentive for districts to fully comply with having students back all day for 5 days. Short of that, if the Board of Ed passes that, short of that, the districts will have to submit a waiver, which the DESE may or may not approve. What is not clear to me is what happens to districts who are out of compliance for the remainder of this year. If we are not able to meet that and we're not granted a waiver, what happens? And so superintendents were not given any heads up that this announcement was going to come today, which is obviously very distressing for us because we then can't be prepared to answer questions about it. And I think really it's better to use a carrot than a stick in order to get districts to where they want to be. Instead of working in partnerships with us, it would have been more helpful for the governor or the commissioner to say to districts, what do you need to open more fully in person? What additional resources, staffing, or support do you need? Instead of asserting that the medical professionals say, you can safely be 3 feet apart and there's not going to be any school spread, when we know that's not the case because we've had school spread. And asserting that there's been no school spread, when I know there's been school spread, it feels disingenuous and not honest to me. And so we are concerned that the Board of Ed is going to accept this recommendation, and then they're going to compel us to move very quickly in a less safe manner to bringing students back. So my recommendation in response, which I had already prepared before the commissioner made his remarks today at the Board of Education, was to take the plans that our elementary principals and central office members have been working on, which include lots of different alternatives for bringing students back, either by grade level or for some portion of the week, or on Wednesdays, or for 4 days, or for 5 days. Every option has a variety of challenges associated with it that made me not move forward with them, particularly in the last couple of months, where our spread in the community was quite high and our numbers were very concerning in our schools. And so it was always our intent to keep revisiting this to see whether we'd have more options. And we were waiting for additional guidance from the CDC, which was planned and then delivered. We were waiting for more guidance from the DESE, which was not delivered, except for transportation. We were waiting for more information about vaccination. Because the one thing I think that many people miss about vaccination is if the public health folks will say that a vaccinated adult does not need to quarantine as a result of exposure to a student, we can keep schools open because we can keep our schools staffed. Even if there are a large number of students who have to miss because they've been quarantined, it will at least allow me to have predictable staffing levels once our staff members have been vaccinated. It'll also give me more flexibility to bring back the very large number of staff members who have medical exemptions that require them to work fully remotely. It'll give me more options for flexible approaches to staffing and personnel, because once vaccinated, those individuals will be able to be brought back into schools and will give us more capacity to manage the district. And so we were not just waiting to make recommendations to the school committee to bring students back, but we're waiting for important information, which has been disappointing in terms of vaccination and has been not forthcoming from the DESE. And so in the absence of that, we're going to take a working group from our 25-member COVID planning and implementation team, which has broad representation of teachers, teachers union folks, health professionals, parents, administrators, et cetera, and really dig deep into the work that's already been done. Hundreds of hours of work have already been done. We just need to narrow the options to be sure we've thought of everything, and then meet several times over the course of the next 2 weeks. And then on the 16th, bring some recommendations to you as a school committee to consider so that we can move ahead with a plan, regardless of whether the state mandates it or not, that makes sense for Winchester to bring more students back in person. So that's where we are with that. It's a K-5 effort at the moment. We will still consider 6 through 12 options, but I'm going to wait a week or two to get that group started until we've made some more determination about K-5. So the only other issues I wanted to talk about in terms of COVID updates would be pooled testing and athletics briefly. So I'll stop there before I talk about pooled testing and take any feedback that you have on our plan for bringing together this working group for our K-5 students.
Ms. Bergstrom.
I just wanted to follow up, Dr. Evans, and be really clear too, because I think that what you said is really important. And, you know, I share Mr. Nixon and Ms. Marchand's frustration with sort of blanket statements, lack of support and follow through, and also lack of funding. Frankly, you know, the Chapter 70 that's coming in through from the state this year is not fully funding the Student Opportunity Act that we expected more money from as well. So I'm frustrated on many of the funding fronts as well for making these plans happen. But to return to student learning time just for a moment, I also want to be really clear that right now the state has said how many hours of student learning time synchronously we need, and that there may be a change to that somewhere between what we have now and the 900 hours that would typically happen in a normal school year, but that the state can't dictate at the local level how we implement the number of hours that are required. so even pre-pandemic, there are districts that may have only gone to school 4.5 days per week because they had long Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, and half days on Wednesday to allow time during the school week for professional development time and time for teachers to collaborate. So I want to be mindful of the fact that even if the state does change our student learning time, that doesn't necessarily dictate a 5-day 8 to 2:20 at elementary school day that we expect to see this fall. But at this time, how we use the learning time we're required to fill through synchronous learning is still the decision of the Winchester School Committee based on the recommendations of the educators and the teams that we put together. Is that an accurate representation?
Within the parameters of the labor contracts.
As well.
So the restriction would be, the length of the school day is and the day's work is contained in each of our 4 labor contracts. And so within those restrictions, yes, we have some flexibility, but I think that the commissioner was really clear. His expectation is 5 full days a week. And so that's the way he's crafting his recommendation to the Board of Ed. And so we want to be back 5 full days as well. It's just a question of what will be the likely outcome if we try to do it, and if it doesn't work well, and it leads to significant community spread or school shutdown, how can we turn back? Once we've changed our schedule, once we've reassigned staff, et cetera, it really is a difficult thing. So we want to proceed quickly to make the recommendations, but be very thoughtful about the implementation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bergstrom. Excuse me. Additional questions on this one topic before Dr. Evans moves on to the other COVID-19 district updates? Ms. Marchand, and then Ms. Bolognese afterwards.
I just want Dr. Evans, I may have missed it and I'm sorry about that, but we were called out repeatedly, whether it was in emails or public comment, about why is this something that we've been promising and all of a sudden now we're going to do it? And I want to highlight and have you, because you'll be able to better explain it, discuss how it also was because of the changing science, changing funding streams, and all of that it wasn't anything you sat back and said, oh, I'm going to hold kids out of school just because, but rather the circumstances as they develop, as the science changes, as the vaccines are being rolled out, are impacting the dialogue moving forward, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think Ms. Hoffman quoted some emails or some updates I've given to the community. All of those are accurate, and I stand by all of them. We have been working on plans. We had hopes to bring students back. We had hopes that all the teachers would be vaccinated by now. And that would have made a huge difference in terms of predictability of staffing, might have made a difference in terms of collective bargaining. There are lots of complexities in this situation that are unknowns. And promised guidance from the DESE was not forthcoming. Beyond anecdotal information that doesn't necessarily help us a lot. We continue to work with other districts and learn from them and work together. I'm meeting with the Middlesex League superintendents on Friday, and we have as an agenda item, return to school. What are you doing? What have you learned? What has been your experience? We meet regularly. I know Janelle and Emma meet with the assistant superintendent. Lori Kirby meets with the HR group. Ellen Whittemore meets with the business managers. Return to school has been a discussion for all of us since we started back this year. And so because we're operating without a lot of accurate information, it makes us rely more heavily on our own public health folks and our own experience rather than the dictates of people who frankly are not in schools every day. They weren't in a middle school today like I was to see what it's like to be in a middle school classroom under pandemic conditions. They've never stood in front of students for 6 or 7 hours straight with a mask on and watch them all so that their mask didn't slip from their nose. And they've never tried to keep 5-year-olds from each other safe all day, moving them around the building with 6 feet distance in between. It's incredibly stressful. I saw remote teachers today. I saw the remote course teacher today in the middle school doing stretching exercises in front of her students. Teachers have found incredibly creative ways to engage students, and we're doing the very best that we can. We wish it were more normal operations. We were trained for that. We have a lot of experience with that. We're looking for the silver linings and trying to keep the things that are working well that we've learned through this pandemic. But in general, I understand. I was a single mother for many, many years. My kids were 7 to 7 kids, before school care, after school care. And many, many families are struggling to have their children home. It's an incredible financial hardship to pay someone for childcare. It's a lost learning opportunity for some students who would do better in school. But in general, the students I'm seeing are doing very well and learning a lot. And if we could have done this easily, if we could have been back safely for 5 full days a week, we would have done it from the start. There's a reason why we are hybrid. And so that's, that's kind of where we've landed.
Thank you for that. And let's not forget that we could also map out Dr. Fauci, whom I'm an admirer of. We can map out all of his statements and dates and stuff and see exactly where the confusion goes all the way up to. So I really hope that people have mercy on our staff and our teachers, because you deserve more than that.
Thank you, Ms. Marchant. Ms. Bolognese.
Thank you. I was just wondering, Dr. Evans, if you could give some idea or heads up either now, today, or when we hear back about the possible scenarios that you and the team are going to be considering about possible outcomes that may happen from each of the different options. I know that back in August, or back at the end of summer last year, you had put together some FAQs and released them to the community about different scenarios that could happen, such as, or I think maybe talking about if we were to return, then some students might not end up with the same teacher. There could be that possibility, could end up at a different school for part of the school year. And I think if those are some of the outcomes that could possibly happen, or as you were just discussing a few minutes ago about the Wednesday schedule, and if we were to bring more children back in person on the Wednesday, then the possible outcome could be that they would be going every other week potentially, and there's an impact on the overall amount of student learning time. So I guess I just feel it's important to understand these kinds of the give and take of each of these options, and for our community to understand that what the possible consequences could be. I don't think whatever we decide, I don't believe that everybody can be happy. And I think we just need to understand, and our community needs to understand, that we may make some choices and there will be some things that people will be unhappy about. But to be able to move forward, we're going to have to accept that.
100%. So the preliminary planning that we've done with the elementary principals involved, I think, 14 different choices, each of which has its own challenges and consequences. I think that's too many. So we're going to pull back on that a bit, but we're going to, in the working group, look at each of the choices and make sure that there isn't any other choice we haven't thought of. You're right in that any decision that we make is going to leave some people feeling unhappy and uneasy. I've had emails today that say, I will never send my child back at less than 6 feet. And so you better have a remote classroom for that child because that child is going to be withdrawn. I have other people saying, if you don't come back for 5 full days, you better be prepared to face dire consequences because I'm very upset. And so you get the full spectrum of people who are incredibly frustrated. And then you have a lot of people who are fearful. I have people writing to me saying, I won't send my child back if you mix cohorts. I won't send my child back if you don't do a deep cleaning and disinfecting in between cohorts. And so whatever, I'm fully prepared for this, and I know that this happens, and this is what school committees have to take on when they make hard choices, is any decision we make, we're going to have a lot of unhappy people. So a few happy people, whatever decision we make, but we'll have a lot of unhappy people. We're trying to mitigate, those consequences in our choices, but luckily we've thought through a lot of the implications. Some will require significant schedule changes or personnel shifts. Some may require students to shift teachers or schools or classrooms. Some may put us out of compliance with student learning time. Some will have an impact on school lunch in terms of how much we need to subsidize our school lunch program, et cetera. Some may have transportation consequences and additional transportation costs. So there are a lot of moving parts, and that's what the working group will tackle to be sure that we follow each pathway and consider all the sort of pieces. Fortunately, a lot of the work has been done already. At some point, we will send a survey out to the parent community to see what their thoughts are, but it's not going to be a menu of options in the greatest number of votes gets that option chosen. It has to be feedback on each option, and then we have to make the best decision possible as a working group, recommendation to the school committee, and a school committee decision about what's the best choice for most of the students in Winchester. And I never like to put out surveys that have options that we may not be able to support, or that we haven't thought through all the consequences or explained them, because without information, inevitably, when I send out those surveys, I get lots of emails. Well, what if XYZ? What if this happens? How can I answer this question? And so people are right. They want to have informed consent when they give us their opinion. And so we will have feedback as part of this process. But again, there will be significant numbers of families who will not want to shift at all and are happy with the current model. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We've got a lot of work behind us that we've already put in, and we'll do our best to be direct and transparent, as I have tried to be every step of the way since this started last March.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bergstrom. Mr. Hand, was it from before? Or is it raised still? Okay,
No,
Ms. Bergstrom.
Just a quick question. Dr. Evans, we've talked a lot about in-person models. Are we committed to also maintaining the remote model for families that want to choose and or need it through the end of the school year?
I think ethically, we said to families, once you make a remote choice, we're going to hold you to that. And we have to hold up our end of the bargain and keep the remote program in place till the end of the year. There are some families who have concerns about their own family's health and need to keep students home for that reason. So whatever scenario we put forward has to keep a full remote option. If large numbers of full remote families decide to come back in person, it could have an impact on the class size of the remaining students. And it could have a staffing implication if we have to move some, we may have to combine some classes and shift teachers around if we need to have more in-person teachers as a result of the return to 5-day. So you can see that this is a very complicated, with 5 elementary schools and 2,000 elementary students and several hundred staff members, it's a complicated algorithm to make all of the numbers work. And we have to operate under the constraints of the collective bargaining agreements for our 4 union groups. So all of it is complex, and it's not as though we can make a decision in 3 days and then implement it. It really does take a little lead time.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Are you ready to move on to fall sports and fall sports? If you want to, I mean, I don't see any additional questions on that topic.
Sure. So the only other topics I have are pool testing and the fall 2 league sports. So sort of this extra fall season where we have several sports. I've given you a summary. The Middlesex superintendents are meeting Friday to look at a couple of minor modifications that the ADs have recommended. But technically the season started yesterday. And so we're hopeful that students will stay healthy. We did have some positive cases on some teams in the last season, and some teams had to shut down for a few days for quarantining purposes. It's not clear to me that the transmission was the result of the team sports, rather gatherings were the suspected culprit, because kids on teams tend to gather. And so that was disappointing to me to see positive cases. It was football and hockey were the two where there were positive cases. So what we've said is if we start to see a significant impact, then we will shut down the team. And fortunately, most of the teams were able to get in their full seasons and reschedule games and have a great experience. So if you have specific questions, I will collect them. And then I'll report back to you at next Tuesday's meeting, because there may be some small modifications as a result of the meeting on Friday with the Middlesex superintendents.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Just a quick point of clarification. You said football and hockey. It wasn't football. It was
Basketball and hockey were the two sports where there were positive cases that had to shut down for a short time. Sorry, football is about
coming up. Yeah, coming up. In the fall. In the fall.
February fall.
Mr. Nixon.
Can't wait for my leaves to turn in a week. Yeah, so I was looking to make that clarification, and also, again, not to single folks out, but we may not have had spread based on athletic competition, but is it not fair to say, Dr. Evans, that these were still team-based gatherings where we had some incidences of spread? Is that not a factor? And if so, that's still something we can continue to work to manage and mitigate, right? So that's, communication through team captains, parents of athletes, the coach, and Mr. Aria.
Absolutely, we'll continue to do that. Yeah. I actually think the genesis of most of the cases were senior parties rather than teams, and then senior players, then gathering with people on the team and passing them along. So the original couple, we had a cluster at the high school. I was pretty direct about that. The result of one large unmasked ill-advised gathering and one smaller gathering to unmasked. And so it's a lesson to us how easily this virus spreads on one night, one ill-advised night of a bad choice. And I think we had 25 students infected. And so that's who attended that event. So that's a lesson to us that school spread can and will happen if people are close and unmasked. And so we just have to be careful.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Seeing no additional questions on that, I don't know if you want to move on to the pool testing. And I just note that Dr. Evans said if you have any questions, you could get back to her about sports.
Yeah. So the pool testing. So the state's the state has matched us up with Beacon. And our team of Jess Pfefferman, Dennis Mahoney, Jen Murphy, and Jen Markham, our nurse leader, have been meeting regularly and work through the vacation to implement all of the many steps associated with starting up pool testing. We decided to start at the high school because it is our largest school and has the greatest movement and mixing of students as they move from class to class, even though there are 2 cohorts, and thought that it would be helpful to do it just at one site. We also have the nurse leader there, and that's helpful as well. What we've learned is that that was a wise decision because the districts who have tried to do it in multiple schools are really struggling with the logistics. It is, I'm going to be clear, an immense amount of work. It's not as easy as it sounds. There are a lot of steps, and they culminated in a letter that went home today that says we're going to start testing seniors next week, and then we'll add teachers and juniors the following week. One of the concerns we have is making sure that our pools that include teachers are very small number of teachers in those pools so that we don't have to quarantine a whole bunch of teachers while everybody comes back to get retested. It is a voluntary pilot. We don't know how many students and teachers will eventually agree to participate. There have been some significant costs to the district and to public health to pay the to pay Jessica to coordinate this. She's made a website for the project. She's helped us develop the letter to go home. She's been the liaison with Beacon. Beacon is identifying a project manager to come out and help train and get folks set up. We also need to rely on parent volunteers because you have to have observers for the swabs, which I have some we have great parent volunteers at the high school through the PFA, but I have reservations about relying on volunteers. And there may be, this is one of those cases where better resource districts may have additional staff members to implement pool testing, or they may just have many fewer students. I mean, our high school is bigger than a lot of the districts who've implemented this. So we have a large number of students, and we're going to roll it out gradually. And we will learn from that, and I'll report back to you after about 4 weeks. We're hoping the state will fund a full 6 weeks into the middle of March. And then we'll learn some lessons. We'll be able to do some cost estimates because once we don't have the support of public health and Beacon, we'll have to budget for additional personnel to run the program. And then scaling it up to add 6 additional sites is a little daunting. And so we will try to look at what the costs and benefits are and make a recommendation to you, but the town will have to see whether they'll be able to provide any funding for this once the pilot happens. So I have shared with you the letter that was sent home to parents today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the effort. I can't say enough about the team at the high school who's worked many, many hours to set this up and ensure that it's going to work well. And I'm really grateful to them for taking this on in addition to everything else they're working on at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Mr. Nixon.
Thank you. So I guess a quick question following up on a comment that that Ms. Andrews made during student report tonight. She was, recently made aware of pool testing. She'd received an email. Sounds like it was hot off the press for her. Can you take a moment, Dr. Evans, just to describe, and I apologize if this has been presented and I missed it, how are we communicating to high school students and parents? Through what means, how frequently, how are we getting the message across?
Sure. So an initial letter went today with some links to additional resources, and there's a website that will become live as well that has a lot of information for people who might be interested in participating. The target audience really for the first week is seniors because they're the ones who will be asked to come. We're going to collect the samples before school in the gymnasium that's already set up, with individual desks for students to eat there. And we're going to try that first, see how that goes, see how many stations we have, see how long it takes to collect the samples. The logistics of following through, our main concern is if we have positive pools, bringing those folks in the pool back. And the requirement now that's changed on the state level is they have to have the Binex rapid test, but they also have to collect an individual sample to send for a PCR test at the same time, because they're concerned that a positive pool means someone is ill and could be infectious, and we want to be sure we identify who that person is. It was the recommendation of the state that you kind of shrug your shoulders and say, if you can't identify who it is, it was probably someone at the tail end of an illness and they're not infectious anymore. But we weren't comfortable with that, and I think the state heard that, and then they changed the protocol. So there's a lot of follow-up that will have to be done if there's a positive pool. If we're lucky and we don't have any positive pools, then we just move on and we test again the next week. And we add another, 400 people to the tests. And then the next week we add another 400 until we're testing the whole 1450 plus staff. As many as volunteer to do it. It is a voluntary process. No one is required to do it. We are encouraging it because we want to have a good idea. And I'm hopeful that we'll get 70 to 80% participation, which will give us a good idea of the usefulness of this. If we have very limited or sketchy or inconsistent participation, then it'll be difficult for us to justify spending large amounts of money to continue with food testing. Particularly if the town is now offering weekly testing, where folks can go and get tested as well. So we'll see where we are. I was a grateful skeptic to hear that this was going to be available to us, and it has been quite costly to start up, I have to say, in terms of time, energy, purchasing additional things. We had to purchase hand scanners, and it's just, there are a lot of hidden, it's like anything else we try to do. There's a lot of sort of read the fine print.
And can you clarify, Dr. Evans? I know when we were talking about this opportunity and ultimately agreed to go forward with it, one of the concerns we had was the prospect of bringing back students who had tested positive in pool testing. We talked about scenarios like maybe using, for instance, the school committee room at Parkhurst. We never use it, but you'd have to have it staffed. People have to know when to get there, because we did have that concern. You'd be bringing in someone who's potentially positive back into the school. So, and I apologize if I missed it. Is the plan to bring them back in for Binax now at the high school, or would that be off-site somewhere?
Yeah, no, there's a location with an outside access door that's going to be used for the retests, and they'll all be scheduled at the same time. So people won't come into the regular building. They'll be given instructions on where to go, and they'll do both the rapid test and the more invasive kind of test right away. It took a lot of planning and kind of coordination to figure out where to do it, who's going to do it. It's a process we'll have to repeat 6 times at each elementary and at the middle school if we go forward with pooled testing there. I share your concern. I share your concern about the members of a positive pool. And the districts, districts like Watertown, I think they said in the first few months they had 19 or 20 positive pools. When they were doing their testing, obviously they have fewer students. And I don't know how many were participating, what percentage were participating, 70 or 80%. So if the local community rate is low and the in-school rate is low, we may not have any positive pools, or we may have one, and it may not be a big issue, but it is certainly a concern. But I think the team has identified a safe way to do the follow-up testing at the high school in a location that is secure, where students don't have to interact with students, or faculty members who are in a positive pool don't have to interact with other people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bergstrom.
Thank you. Dr. Evans, you talked a little bit about the hidden costs associated with this, and I sort of have a 2-part question. Do you have any capacity to define those additional costs for us and let us know what budget lines those are coming out of right now? Do we still have COVID-19 funds from the state or federal government that's helping us to cover those in the short term? And how you would anticipate if we needed to continue pool testing, particularly if we're going to try to bring more students back, how we would cover those costs, and would there be any grant funding available in the future? And also, along with many of the other claims I've heard out of DESE in the state that they are providing pooled testing to districts, I believe that that's only till the end of March. So have you heard any additional information or anticipate any additional information of the state itself continuing to cover any of these costs? Or do you still anticipate this is on Winchester starting April 1st?
So it may extend two more weeks into April because we're starting a little bit later. So they said they'd give us a full 6 weeks. So what are they giving us? They're giving us the test kits themselves and the processing of the tests. And payment for the FedEx to send the tests out to be processed. They're giving us some support from Beacon in the form of a project support person. But what they're not supporting is some of the technology, the scanners, the printers. They're not covering the cost of Jessica Pfefferman, who is funded by the public health department in our town from the town budget. And once the pilot is over, we have to negotiate ourselves with the vendor to see what they'll charge us per test, per pool, because there's no guarantee that that cost that the state is paying is going to stay the same. We have to get our own contract individual. This is another great part of being in Massachusetts. Every district is going to have to negotiate their own contract with the vendor for the pool testing. So we have no source of funding in the school department budget. And, the scanners, Jen Alaba said she would order them from Amazon with her credit card in order to get them and get reimbursed. And so Ellen will identify a source of funding. There are some funds available in some of the COVID-related grants, but certainly not enough to do 7 schools. There's not even enough to continue the high school, really. We haven't put aside funding for pooled testing. There may be additional federal monies that come. If we get an additional grant of $500,000, is that what we want to spend it on, is the question. And I've spoken with Jessica Pfefferman about this issue. How will we determine whether this was successful? What will be the decision matrix around continuing or expanding it to 7 schools? What are the benefits? What are the costs? And so we're learning a lot about that. Any implementation that relies on a lot of volunteers is always difficult. Someone has to manage the volunteers. Someone has to sign them up. Someone has to supervise that they come. So there are a lot of sort of pieces of this that we can quantify the cost, but certainly, my economics professors told me there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as free pool testing. It's somewhat subsidized, but it's still extremely costly. And in the end, it will be very costly to implement once the state stops subsidizing it.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Ms. Marchant.
Very briefly, I could solve this problem for the state if they would just put resources into vaccinating our staff. And so I encourage our parent community, if anyone's listening, I would appreciate a letter writing campaign, flood the governor and let him know that in order to save our districts, which I didn't agree with in the beginning, this pool testing, in order to save our resources and be more effective in reopening schools, vaccinate our teachers, vaccinate our staff. That's the most cost-effective way to reopen our schools and to not have to deal with pool testing and its complexities.
Thank you, Ms. Marchant. Mr. Nixon.
I would just observe that the state that's now saying districts each have to negotiate their own contracts with the testing companies is the same state that bullied districts into group negotiated settlements with yellow bus companies. So just dwell on the irony for that for a moment. But I have a question for maybe as much for the chair as for the superintendent. Given there was a significant reserve fund transfer, is there an understanding with Enzo and the other members of the finance committee about the allocation of those funds that goes towards testing costs? As Dr. Evans mentioned, we have some staff members from the Board of Health. Can somebody just sort of help us understand how we're accounting for those costs? To what are we attributing those costs? And what expectation is there for some discussion about allocating reserve fund transfers to cover some of that? Which I presume that's a discussion that is going to happen.
So, Mr. Nixon, I would just say that I don't know if Dr. Evans is ready to talk about the cost of what we've been incurring. It should be something we'll talk about, but right now she's still trying to get things up and running. As far as reserve fund transfer, that money was recommended be put into the reserve fund at the request of the select board and voted by town meeting, so that it could potentially be available for issues like testing in our schools, testing in our community. That said, once the money is in the reserve fund, it is under the control of the finance committee. I have every reason to believe that they would expend that money for such an expense, but it would be us going to them and requesting a reserve fund transfer. So I don't have an answer because we don't have a cost. And the way the finance committee works is very few things are just open-ended. Sure, we got the money, you can have it. It'll be how much is it going to cost? What is it going to cover? And until we can sort of have that question, I'm not sure I have a good answer, nor are they likely to give me a good answer.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Ms. Bolognese.
Thank you very much. Dr. Evans, I know that the registration has just started, but I was wondering if you've heard any indication of how it is going so far?
So we had a few people try it out for ease of registration, and they found it quite easy. So that was good. It took a lot of upfront work on our part to get that ready to roll. I'll have a better sense next Tuesday about how many students. It's only students the first week, just to sort of get the ball rolling, and only in seniors, I think. If for some reason, and we're doing it on 2 days, 1 day for each cohort, and then trying to take a look at how quickly we get the results and whether those testing days work for that purpose. So I'll have more information next Tuesday. I don't have any sense, since the letter just went out, how many students and families are going to participate. We encourage participation, but it's not mandated.
And then is there a minimum threshold that we need to meet for the testing population in order to consider it significant, representative of our school?
No, I did ask that. What's the minimum percentage of participation? And Jessica and I actually discussed that for us to consider this valid information. But because it is voluntary and we can't compel, short of 100%, it's not great. I mean, I think that if you only have half of the students participating, it could mean that students who are not participating could be positive and infectious, and it's not giving you great information. It depends on what you're using the information for. Is it for peace of mind, to have validation that there's not a lot of positive cases in the school? Is it for public health reasons, to inform the wider community, to see what community positivity rates might be? There are definitely benefits to general public health, to knowing to having more students tested and staff members tested. But in terms of keeping schools open or opening them more fully, I don't think it has an impact on either of those.
So I have it's probably a too granular a question. So I will start with just saying I was skeptical of this. I think I'm coming around. But when I look at sort of some of the details, I'm a father of two high schoolers. It certainly sort of, it hits me, and I don't like to talk about me, but I sort of look at sort of some of the details. I see that the cohort BB, it would be tested, at least under this first initiative, on a Thursday. Are we thinking that those results will be back on a Friday, or are we thinking that it will be post-Friday? And if those results come back on Friday at 11 a.m., what does that mean in a practical matter to kids who are in a school building at 11 a.m. on Friday?
Right. I mean, I think that's the key question about how quickly we can, if we're going to test before school and send the tests, have FedEx pick them up and send them to the lab right away, and we hear early on Friday, then we can bring the pool in, or the pool is already there to be retested. But there's always that concern, if you're testing on a Thursday or Friday, you're going to get results on the weekend. And then we don't have the capacity to bring people in on the weekend to retest. So it could mean that there's somebody positive out there walking around spreading, or we tell the pool you need to quarantine for the weekend, which is the more likely outcome, that in sort of voluntary quarantine associated with the pool testing. So the cohort B is a little at a disadvantage if we're not able to get the results and retest on Friday, that it could impact a weekend. So there's no perfect day to test. The testing firms tell us that if everybody in the state tries to test on the same day, it's going to take them more than 24 hours to do the test. So there's some advantage to testing on a day when not a lot of districts are testing. And so again, we're going to learn a lot as we go through, see what works, see what doesn't work. I know that there are some people who are very much in favor of this testing in our community. And we want to give it a reasonable shot at success and learn from it and then make good choices afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. That's very helpful. Ms. Bergstrom.
Mr. Vernali, I just wanted to follow up on your question. Dr. Evans, in a case like Mr. Vernali brought up, are we requiring students to be retested solely through the school district, or could they go seek their own follow-up testing if they're notified through a Stop the Spread location or private physician?
We need to determine as quickly as possible who in the pool is positive so we can release the rest of the pool to go about their business in their normal lives. And so anybody who signs up is agreeing to come back for the retest as soon as they're notified with the rapid tests and the PCR test that we'll send out for an individual test. And that's going to be an additional cost, by the way, to the district for each individual retest that we have to send out is going to be a fairly significant cost if we have a lot of positive pools. So we can't. I mean, people could go and get tested on their own, but it would mean that everyone else would have to be quarantined for more days until everybody's test results came back. So I don't think we can do that. People have to agree to follow the process or they can't participate.
I guess I was thinking of the scenario where the test came back and the students would have to be quarantined all weekend, but if Saturday morning their parents chose to take them to a Stop the Spread location, they could potentially have their results back by Sunday morning, and that might actually help us out.
Yeah, that's true if that's the case. I still think we would require them to clean out. Well, I mean, if they were tested and found to be positive, there's always the case where there could be 2 positive people in a pool. So everybody, even if we find the 1 positive person, we think everyone has to be retested and go through the same protocol. So they'd still have to come in on Monday and be part of the data collection.
Thank you. Ms. Bolognese.
Thank you. One clarification. I thought that in some of the guidance that we had received around if there were a positive test, that other members of the pool would not have to quarantine. They could still carry on with their daily business, including being in school.
Yeah, originally the DESC said that if you have a positive pool and everyone comes in and they do the quick test and you can't identify who the person is, then everyone can just go on their way and you don't have to worry about it. It means that it was either a false positive or somebody was on the tail end of an infection. Okay. I think that they got enough feedback saying that makes us all really uncomfortable to think that there might be a positive person out there, that they are now requiring not only the rapid test, but also a PCR test in addition. So everyone gets the rapid test, and while they're waiting for that to process, they do the individual PCR test at the nurse's office or the location that we've determined at the high school.
Okay, thank you. I think you might have mentioned that earlier, and I just didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the information changed over the course of the pilot process, and that's the most recent information that I have. It could change again, but that's what they're telling us right now.
Okay. And then I'll just add as a plug for the Stop the Spread sites that Everett's Cataldo ambulance site last Friday. Well, we went in and we tested at 5:40 p.m., supposedly about 20 minutes before they were closing. Maybe they were open until 7 p.m. But even testing at 5:40 p.m., we were the only people there. And then our results actually came back at 5:15 a.m. the following day. So
good to know.
Turnaround was good.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bergstrom, is your hand raised again, or is that?
No, I just didn't put it down.
Okay. So seeing no further questions, I thank you for a very thorough report tonight. And I do want to point out to the committee and everyone that it is 9 o'clock and we have a thorough agenda still beyond us. So I thank you, and I would like to ask, if possible, that we move on to the next agenda item. Seeing no disagreement with that, next agenda item is the interim superintendent update. As you all may know, we unanimously selected Dr. Hackett to be the interim superintendent starting July 1. Ms. Bolognese and I spent the weekend getting to know Dr. Hackett via Zoom, socially distanced, of course, and negotiating with him. And I would like to ask Ms. Bolognese to update the committee on where we are and what we learned. If you're ready, Ms. Bolognese.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll just start with a little recap of the last week, since much has happened over February vacation. So the screening team was very happy to bring forward 2 candidates to school committee last Wednesday for consideration and for interviews. And last Friday, the school committee unanimously approved Dr. Frank Hackett as our interim superintendent of schools. So we have subsequently reached agreement with him to a 2-year contract, which is in consideration of the many challenges we're facing over the course of this year, including return to school in a pandemic, the Lynch School building project that's already, or that has just advanced to feasibility stage, and then upcoming negotiations with all of our employee unions. So with his 20 cumulative years as a superintendent in Braintree, Pembroke, and several communities in Maine, and his breadth of experience in building projects, strategic planning, lean teams, and authentic learning and listening, he brings the steady, strong leadership that we need to see us through the next 24 months and bring us out on the other side of the pandemic as a stronger community. So we are looking forward to introducing him in an upcoming meeting and then welcoming him on his July 1st start later in the year.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bolognese. And the community should know, should have seen the release that was sent out detailing much of this. And I would open up to any questions or comments from the committee. We hope to welcome new interim superintendent at a meeting in the near future to welcome him to the community. Seeing no questions, this is a short but a really good piece of news for us. So I feel like too bad we can't stretch out some of the good news and sort of truncate some of the depressing news. But we'll just go on from there. I would like to express deep thanks to Ms. Kirby, who spent much of her weekend with us working over some of the contract issues that we're working on. It was her weekend, and I spent many hours on the phone with her